game show theme music, Charles.
Impressive, my friend, impressive. Yeah.
So, to tell the truth, crowdsource the truth, I wonder which of these fine contestants will actually tell the truth.
Well, I think on the show it's will the real criminal please stand up? And I think we know who the real criminal is.
There we go. Yes, of course, we know. Well, this is a particularly interesting graphic, Charles, because people might say, gee, why would Dr. Jerome Corsi, Charles Ortel, and James Comey be in a lineup? What do each of these individuals have in common?
Well, I suppose each of us may end up getting accused of criminal activity. I know Dr. Corsi has been accused of criminal activity. I've accused Comey of criminal activity. So far, nobody has accused me of criminal activity. But the question would be, will the real criminal please stand up?
Are we allowed to speak about the body to which each of you have spoken in common?
Well, I'd like to first, we will do that,
Okay.
but what I'd like to do first is just give some context to why we picked to tell the truth. I mean,
Yes.
we are at a truth-telling moment. For the three whistleblowers who've been in the news, who are getting a lot of attention, they'll be testifying tomorrow in Congress. But Jason, I've told you this, but our wider audience doesn't know that I owe my getting into the media business to a wonderful lady who's very much still with us called Patricia Addis, who is the mother of one of my oldest friends. I met him when I switched schools to second grade to Grace Church School, and Pat was then a mother in the early 60s, a mother of 3 young kids, divorced, which was very unusual at that time frame in New York City in the 60s. And I watched her firsthand struggle, to her ex-husband left her with nothing, and she had to try to put kids through private school, and it was unusual to shoulder the burden of raising 3 kids without a nanny and also try to work. And she started a business basically of providing promotional gifts, to corporations. In the early days, she would get, calendars and mugs, and then she would get medals and other things like that. And she also had a lifelong interest in the theater, and I think her mother had some money and helped her with this. And she would always say to us, we're little kids, someday I'm going to win a Tony Award. In second grade, you're like, what's a Tony? We have to go to all these shows. And sure enough, this woman put her 3 kids, they went to reasonable schools. She endured the tragedy of losing one child to drug overdose, which was a very brutal, obviously, tragedy. But the other 2 children have done really well in life, and she's got grandchildren. And when we were very young, this middle child and I won't reveal his first name, Mrs. Addis put our name into a talent agency, just in our details. So I'm there in my senior year of college at New Haven in September, and I'd spent my junior year abroad, so I had been away and I hadn't seen my friends in a while. And we all like to play jokes on each other, and the phone rings, and I had a single, and hello, is this Charles Ortel? Yeah. This is NBC Studios. We'd like you to come in and be on a program with us. And I said, I had this chief prankster named Roger Sherman. I said, Roger, would you cut the crap? And I slammed the phone down. In the days when long distance phone calls were expensive or whatever. And so they called back, no, really, don't slam the phone down again. This really is NBC. I said, Roger, come on, it's not going to work. You're not, no, please take a pencil and write our number down. So I wrote the number down. I had to pay for this call. And I get through, and sure enough, it is to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And in the very small world department, I had to be an imposter for a guy who subsequently had a very big career in media named Garth Ancier, A-N-C-I-E-R, who was, I think, one of the first presidents of the Fox network, and then a bunch of different networks. I think there was controversy involved with him. And he resigned one of his positions. And anyway, I went to that thing, and we stumped the panel. So that was back in 1977.
Remind me what the point is, though.
So what it is you're joined. The imposters are joined. I think there's 2 imposters and 1 real person, or there might be 3 imposters and 1 real. I forget the actual composition now. So many years later, 41 years later, but there's a real person, and the celebrity judges, Kitty Carlisle and those type of people, have to guess who is the real, in this case, criminal, or who's the real Garth Ancier. And the tagline at the end of the thing is, will the real Garth Ancier please stand up? And I got 3 votes.
They thought you were.
Yeah, they thought I was. And so we stumped the panel. And back in '77, the top prize was $500 split 3 ways. And so I got, because I got the most votes, I got the extra penny. I got 166.67. That's the sum total of all the money I've made in media so far. I mean,
Wow.
note to the agents out there, I'm not averse to getting paid. It's, once we get the Clinton Foundation thing done, I enjoy what we're doing.
Charles, there's a lot of people who think that you pay me or I pay you.
No, we contribute our respective time, and you contribute all the investment here and your expertise, and I do the the slides and stuff. And
the writing, the research.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me, though, to see how this campaign is ramping up. For a long time, there were people who tried to spread disinformation about me, people who even wrote emails to you telling you false things about me. And it's curious that some of these people have now emerged on some Kiwi YouTube channels spreading more false information. And I'm just trying to determine, what's the line between the gullible and the complicit? Because people can't possibly believe this nonsense, but it does seem to be closely linked to the time where these whistleblowers are coming forward to reveal perhaps the coup de grace.
Well, yeah, you're showing off that French.
What does that
Next thing you
mean?
know, it means the death.
The death blow, right.
The death blow. Yeah. I think that...
Perhaps I'm fluent in French. People think...
That's what I was going to say. You could be working for the French, too.
Right, because they're saying because I know 1 or 2 phrases in Russian, apparently I speak
right.
Russian fluently. I was married to a Russian-speaking person for 3 years.
And I know you like pizza, so you must be Italian.
I must be Italian,
That's
exactly.
Right. You stayed at a Quality Inn, too. But no, one of the things that's happened, and I've related this before, that my father, who is very knowledgeable about technology matters, and he long ago said to me, that the internet, if you use the internet or advances in internet and related technologies to just lower the cost of what you're doing, you're not really doing anything special. But if you use the internet to do something that traditional media can't do or is not presently doing, then that's very valuable. And so what you're doing with Crowdsource the Truth is exactly that. This is a concept to turn people who enjoy following the news into citizen journalists who can actually come forward. And we're going to give you a special opportunity later in the show actually to help us do some of that, because there's a puzzle I've laid out that our wide audience, you've got, I guess, almost more than 75,500 subscribers now. So you're growing by leaps and bounds.
Actually, I think it's over 76,000, isn't it?
I thought it was 75.5.
I could be wrong.
Rounding up to 76. 76.5. Wow.
There you go.
There,
look at that,
gee,
Charles.
never quibble with truth at Crowdsource the Truth. He knows the truth.
Well, I think the other thing that's interesting is 16 million video views. Now, I mean, this is in just 2 years, and for the first several months, I was really just getting off the ground. So, this has been a pretty recent development, and there's been rapid growth to Crowdsource the Truth. And as you said, people who are viewing participate interactively. We've had witnesses come forward who then other people go and intimidate to try to prevent them from sharing information.
But it's sad about that. But on a positive front, we've had people come out from nowhere, people neither you nor I actually knew, say, we like what you're doing, we want to help, we'd like to file a complaint, we'd like to contact this, we'd like to recommend you for a prize, we'd like to help this way or that way. Of course, you have people who are helping to finance this expensive effort, and that revenue goes to you, as it should.
Well, that's our generous sponsors on patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. Not to interrupt, Charles, but there's been a dust-up recently with Patreon where people are unhappy that they are deplatforming certain more conservative voices, and so what I'm doing is we're still active on patreon.com. I like Patreon. I hope they'll reconsider some of these choices, but what I've just begun is a new page on Subscribestar, and so people can go to subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth, and they can become sponsors on there. I'm in communication with the technical support people at Subscribestar, and I expect by later tonight all of the video formats that I'm producing content on, including the series that was previously only on Patreon, will now also be available to subscribers on Subscribestar. And you know, Charles, we just started in December. People who become sponsors at $10 per month or higher get a free Sunday with Charles screensaver. I've been receiving emails. People love the screensaver, Charles.
I'm sure it's a good idea. It's a good. I mean, I can reveal this name, and it's a bit of name dropping. But when I was at business school, one of my friends was a guy called John Davis, who is it was a year behind me, and he's the son of Marvin Davis, who was the mega billionaire oil guy who bought 20th Century Fox with Rupert Murdoch. Oh. And so after graduating from business school, John went to produce movies, and he's done that ever since 1981, including, you know, I think he's done some of the very big Schwarzenegger movies and other. And I visited him on the lot back in the early 90s, you know, when he had an actual, you know, cabana, serious one. I mean, they're all pretty small, but it was like, you know, several rooms.
Oh, if you have an office on the lot, that's
big. Right?
Yeah.
So he had, well, it helped that his father owned the lot, but
right.
but he's produced a bunch of commercial success, big successes, and what he did there, and my idea for this to suggest that you consider the screensaver, was when you would go to his office, what he had done enough movies that it was just, the walls were filled with his movie posters. And it's one thing, you know, when somebody does one movie,
right?
You know, you come away and you say, that's pretty amazing. Like a next door neighbor of ours, who's now passed away, was in a bunch of the Reagan movies.
Huh. Bedtime for Bonzo?
Yeah,
was it a chimpanzee?
She was the love interest in one of the movies.
Wow.
And she's a very successful, she was the granddaughter of an actress, and her father, I think, founded this, whichever it was, for play, Union for
AFTRA.
I think he founded that or co-founded that, and he left her with this nice house on Grove Street in the Village.
Wow, that is nice.
Well, it's a 6-story building, and
wow,
and yeah, and she,
that's worth millions now.
Oh, of course, and she when it was really decrepit, when we were growing up in the 60s and 70s, they had all these spare apartments, so. They would just say, "Oh, hey, Rod Steiger, you need a place?" So Rod Steiger lived with them, and
wow.
And I grew up, you know, with not knowing who all these people were.
Like, you were in the twilight zone.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, but I, you know, they just wanted to talk and tell stories of my parents, and we just wanted to get back out in Washington Square Park and play.
Well, you know, when I had a house in Hollywood, I did put the movie posters from the various films I've worked on around the wall. It's pretty standard practice. Charles, Valerie Boyan is saying that one time I read her comment while we were live, and she felt very important, so perhaps she feels that way again. We couldn't do this without the Crowdsource community, and certainly not without the generous sponsors, so I really appreciate that.
Absolutely, and this idea, and it's funny now, we'll get into it a little bit in the show, but I'm having more and more contact with the mainstream, and recently the Washington Post may do a hatchet job on me, we'll see, we'll talk about that in a bit, but they asked me how they should describe me, and I said, well, why don't you just say I'm the co-host of Sunday with Charles? And they said, okay, fine, that's what we'll do.
Wow.
And I said, why don't you watch, you know, our playlist? Just Google Sunday with Charles playlist, you'll see what we do.
Yeah.
But you know, here in college, in the 70s, 74 to 78, that was a moment where you really would go and turn on the evening news and watch Walter Cronkite, because people felt that Walter Cronkite, you know, erroneously back then, was fair, and, you know, rather than waste a lot of time and energy trying to investigate what was going on, just spend half an hour listening to Walter Cronkite and you get your news. You know, those days are long gone.
Yeah.
And now I think people who care about the news and, you know, care about their lives and their futures, they realize that in order to figure out the truth, you have to invest some energy yourself. And so this is a show for people who would like to find truth themselves. We're not always going to be right, but we're trying to focus on the important issues around the Clinton Foundation and give you the tools, the audience, to get into it and figure out who's right and who's wrong.
Now here's something truly kind of amazing, because you cannot see the comments, and frankly it's difficult for me to even see them, but just as you're saying that, oh, and I just lost it. Okay, here we go. We've got Old Duffer saying that so many people are waking up. He was always the, well, could be he or she, was always the conspiracy guy, And now, more and more friends or family are asking him about what's going on.
Yeah.
And I see that happening a lot too.
Right.
We did a show yesterday with the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, who have had a breakthrough recently. They've convinced the U.S. Attorney here in the Southern District of New York to impanel a grand jury and evaluate the vast evidence that's been assembled over the last 17 years by architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. And there's even talk among them that they're changing the name of the thing to 9/11 Truth and Justice.
And the American way.
That is the American way. We got to pull it back from the brink. If you
Right.
look at the James Comeys, the Robert Muellers, the American way is corruption, lying, entrapment. That's not good.
Well, it's funny. It's really interesting. I was just at a lunch. It's an interesting firm. I don't, as you know, Jason, I don't like to go to lunch.
Yeah.
But
Opposite of me.
it's like, I remember the Wall Street movie, Wall Street. Lunch is for wimps. But but honestly, lunch is a waste of time.
It's
I mean,
delicious.
have a big dinner. That's all I do. Once a day.
I like breakfast. I like lunch.
Yeah. But anyway, on the
yeah.
subject of that meal, there were some very smart people in that room, other than me, including a guy who used to be in charge of. There's an NSA, and then there's the Economic Security Czar, and he was the Economic Security Czar under Obama. His name is Roger Kabarich.
Huh. Have we heard the name of that agency? Economic Security?
It's not. I think I forget what it is. He has the highest possible security clearance, and he
Not
was
the SEC.
No. He was in charge of under Obama, and there's one now under Bush, under Trump. He was the point person for figuring out what are America's economic vulnerabilities, and he's a good guy. I've known him for a while. He's an economist and whatever. There was a guy called Marty Leibowitz who's one of the smartest bond people in the world. He's a very famous guy. There's only about 7 or 8 of us talking shit basically about the economy and politics and whatever. And then there was a 92-year-old guy named Ben Gaines who's an expert on Washington, and he was trying to make the argument that people who are against globalism most of the people in the room were anti-Trump. People who are against globalism are fundamentally anti-Semitic and racist.
Why anti-Semitic?
Well, because they quickly go to the theme of the world is controlled by the Rothschilds and a small number of Jewish people and this, and then they control banking and media. And I, in front of these reasonably powerful people, I cut the guy off and I said, listen, that's interesting what you're saying, but what you're saying actually is incredibly inflammatory and wrong. All right, so I'm somebody. I tell them I have a podcast. I've done 125 of these 2-hour shows. I'm one of the maybe leaders of people who would be against, it's not globalism, but unregulated globalism. So when you falsely claim that people who are criticizing globalists are anti-Semitic,
Yeah.
or you're really doing a disservice to yourself. I certainly am not anti-Semitic, and I'm certainly not racist. And to make a comment like that, to say that anybody who would dare criticize globalism,
Yeah.
is either racist or anti-Semitic or both. That's outrageous. You guys know better than that to do that. And it was like these are one of the guys I think in that room was a billionaire, and they just couldn't believe that was just all in this guy's grill.
Well, it's almost like cue the moment in Mission Impossible where Charles rips off the rubber mask and it's Hillary Clinton under there saying that.
Right. And I said, I'm somebody who, if I wanted to, I could have chosen to be in this group, but I didn't like this. I don't think it's correct to be engaged in this corruption. I think globalism is a distraction. The largest and most interesting market in the world is the American market. The Chinese market is a third the size of the American market. Why would you waste time and energy trying to get business over there when there's tons of business to get here in this country? Why would you waste your time going to these stupid conferences where leaders like Macron are going to insult you, and next thing you know, Macron's going to be facing the guillotine several weeks later. But anyway, we're wandering a little bit. I just wanted to say that this is a different approach, and I'm delighted the new friends I've made through you, Jason, and what our friendship, who are actually very helpful now in raising the consciousness. Since we began this effort to focus on Clinton Foundation together, we've gone from a relatively small number of viewers to, at peak, a large number. Now we're regularly getting, within 24 hours, 10,000 viewers or more. I ran those statistics by the Washington Post again, and they were like, really? You can get 10,000, a 2-hour podcast, you get 10,000 views in 24 hours? I said, yep, yes we do. Without promoting it. You know, you're not paying for advertising to get viewers, it's just word of mouth. And you know, these whistleblowers, we're not going to mention their names. It's logical that if you're going to do anything about the Clinton Foundation, you might want to Google me, and you might want to look at all the free work that I've done and stuff that's out there. And so it's incredibly logical that the 3 whistleblowers, or the guy who's done the most work, would have contacted me years ago, which he did. And it's quite logical that he might have asked me to take a close look at the evidence that he got, some of which he got from me, most of which he got from the making public requests, records requests. I have no economic interest in their activities. What they're doing is separate and apart from this. But of course they consulted me. They were interested in picking my brain to understand what it is I had found. With one of them, I speak at least once a day, except on the weekends when I give him free time for his family. These are American patriots. So tomorrow you're about to learn. I'm not going to reveal their names. You won't either, I believe. I hope. But the world will know tomorrow who these people are, and in 2 cases they are public servants. In one case it's a private citizen who's written a book, and so these are all red, white, and blue-blooded Americans who didn't have to do this. They're not doing it for political reasons. They're doing it for patriotic reasons. The American, one thing that's distinctive about America relative to other countries is the degree to which people get involved in apolitical, charitable causes. They devote a lot of time and energy to these causes. They do enormous good works inside and outside this country. So when a bunch of crooked ruffian interlopers come in from Arkansas, which I'm sure there are many nice people in Arkansas, but come in from Arkansas to sully the good name and reputation of the hundreds of thousands of people inside our great state here in New York who actually care about the laws, who actually run charities properly. When they come in and they have secret offices and they file false and materially misleading report, they intimidate people who might criticize them, they intimidate the media, they go against the media for trying to cover this thing fairly, and they cost the New York State taxpayer a lot of money by false donations claimed for things that aren't charities, by failures to collect taxes and penalties. When you do this, as the Clintons have done since 1998 in our state, when Hillary Clinton was representing the state as a senator, when she needed money for her campaigns, when I believe it's highly likely that this foundation was used to subsidize her campaigns, both for Senate, for re-election, for president, and again for president. This is an outrage, a despicable outrage. And as I was telling the Washington Post person who made the mistake of contacting me, because apparently the Clintons have made allegations about me that all of my work is demonstrably false.
There's other people making allegations as well, Charles. I wonder if they aren't aligned.
Right, and I said to this Eric Wemple, I said, that's I didn't exactly say it this way. I said, listen, bud, if you got a specific allegation you want to run by me that is demonstrably false, please tell me. But I'm going to tell you right now that you don't have one, and the Clinton Foundation doesn't have one, and the Clinton people don't have one, because if they did have one, they would have contacted me long ago, which they've never done.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is the way cowards like to operate, Charles. They, spread around a lot of nonsense, and then there are some people who are going to believe anything that's said. This will cheer you up. The angry Shamrock says, you are the bomb diggity. So that's good. You can't beat that. And the other thing I wanted to bring to people's attention, Charles, is that on Crowdsource the Truth 2, people can utilize Super Chat. There are some people who prefer to sponsor the show by clicking on the Super Chat icon right there, and that allows people to send money through Google to Crowdsource the Truth. So we're really not having any corporate sponsors. As an experiment, I have monetized the Crowdsource the Truth 2 YouTube channel, but of course every video I put up, they say not suitable for advertisers. But oddly, when I look at videos on Crowdsource the Truth 2, there are ads there. So I don't know how Google gets away with that, but there was that interesting hearing yesterday where their CEO had the Monopoly Man sitting behind him. That guy's great with the monopoly money. Hopefully they'll take some antitrust action against Google. Charles, shall we get right into the...
Well, we should compliment the art department,
Well,
because I think once again the art department has outdone itself, and with the game show music, this really was, I tell you, I mean, it was technically the second time I was on television. I was on a local New Haven television channel for some students reacting to, I think it was Senator Mac Mathias of Maryland visited New Haven, and I was one of 3 or 4 students who was asked to ask questions and interact with him. But I was so freaking nervous before going on this show. I mean, I was really, really nervous. And what was really interesting to me, the way they did the show back then is they have one test. They run it once as just giving you a chance to try it, not for real, right? But the test is in front of a live studio audience.
Dress rehearsal.
Yeah, dress rehearsal. Yeah, there you go. That thing. and when I said something and the audience laughed at it, I intentionally wasn't trying to be serious and have them laugh. I was trying to make a joke and they laughed. That cheered me up and gave me enormous confidence. And so I felt very comfortable, especially because they said, look, just don't look at the audience, look at the questioner, and look directly at the questioner and just answer the question. So I did that, and I felt quite comfortable doing it. I've never actually seen the segment. I'd love to see it.
Somewhere out there is the Charles Ortel appearance on To Tell the Truth from, when was it?
September 1977. I'm not sure. I want to say, I think I have a ticket that says September 21st on it somewhere, but I may be misremembering it. I mean,
18 USC 1001.
Exactly. I don't think you're working for the FBI.
Let's talk for a moment about the, or can we?
Sure. So, yeah, you're referring to the fact, this is going to be a somewhat poignant moment. I'm sorry to report that my ex-wife literally has hours to live. And I knew this, I found out about this within the last 48 hours. And anyway, after I found out about it, I get a call. You know, I'm speaking, I forget if I was speaking to you or to Jerry, but I was speaking with one of the...
Speaking to Dr. Corsi.
Yeah, I was speaking to Corsi. And I always check my phone. If something comes in, I have call, whatever it is, you know, identity.
Yeah.
And it's a 202 number. So I pick it up, and I said, you know, Jerry, I got to take this call. It's from Washington. So I pick it up, and it's like, hello, Mr. Ortel? This is, I'm not going to tell the guy's name. This is Special Agent, whatever his name was, you know. Are you having a good day? You know, and how do you answer a question like that? I said, well, my ex-wife is dying, but I'm very happy that you called because...
Special agent from?
Oh, the FBI. And I'm very happy that you called because I really want to talk to you about this massive Clinton Foundation fraud. And I said, well, we don't want to talk about that.
Never mind that.
No, we want to talk to you about WikiLeaks. Do you have any time today? And I said, sure. Yeah, we're in a car, we're going to be in New York shortly. I said, fine, I'll be midtown, I'm happy to meet you. And I want to, you know, I'm not going to get into to what we talked about, but I'll just say that for now, the 2 agents who were there were extremely professional. They were respectful. They asked good questions. I tried to give complete answers. At one point, one of the agents said, you know, interrupt me, and he said, you know, Charles, I asked him to call me Charles, and they said, you know, we do question quite a few people, and we got to tell you, you have a phenomenal memory. Because as I generally do on this show, and also, you know, when I'm presenting a topic, I never use notes because I don't want to get involved in something unless I know the thing. And if I know it, why do I need notes? You know?
But I find it curious that the FBI would comment on your memory, almost as if here's the crew that's sent out to get you to say something that later they'll be like, oh, you lied.
No, I mean, I made it very clear. I said, look, to the best of my recollection, you're asking me questions about, you know, tens of thousands of emails. I'm obviously not going to remember every single. And they had printed out copies of emails. What did you mean by this email? What did you mean by this and that? And I made it very clear that my concern is exposing the largest fraud ever attempted in the world, which is this Clinton Foundation and its affiliates. And I pointed out to them, this is twice the size, in my estimation, of Bernie Madoff. I'm quite surprised that the FBI is not jumping all over this. Especially Comey was happy to put Corinne Brown in prison, an
Right.
African-American Democratic congressman, age 71 back then, for 5 years in federal prison over less than $1 million, and now Steve Stockman, 10 years in federal prison for around $1 million. But you're not going to go after a $2.8 billion plus fraud just because the Clintons and Bushes and Obamas may be involved with it? I mean, that's just outrageous.
Well, that's a lovely tie you have, Mr. Ortel. Now, about this WikiLeaks thing.
Right.
They don't want to talk about
Right.
that stuff.
But I would just say, I mean, I may change my tune, but I enjoyed meeting those two people, and I have to say, as I told them, I said, listen, there are, I'm sure, good FBI people and bad FBI people, just as they're outside the FBI, they're good people and they're bad people. It's just the way the world works. In a large organization, of course, there are going to be some bad people. But the interaction I had yesterday was professional. We'll see if things change.
Yeah.
And that's all I'd like to say about it.
Okay, very good.
So maybe if we jump into the slides.
Absolutely. I was just responding to somebody there in the comments who was saying some dopey stuff.
So when we think about the period, we've talked about the 30 years war that's been waged on American workers and really workers in higher income countries around the world. This is a war under the so-called New World Order in which Bush 1, Clinton, Bush 2, and Obama all were integrally involved one way or another, and all have benefited one way or another, to the tune, in most cases, of tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions in the case of Clinton and Obama. And they're incapable, these administrations are incapable, the insiders, of telling the truth. What really happened? How have worker incomes changed from 1988 to the present, adjusted for a real inflation, adjusted per hour to the fact that you don't work 40, nobody works 40 hours unless you're in government. Then you come in 10 o'clock, the crack at 10 o'clock, watch some porn,
3
go to
hours
lunch.
at the bar.
Yeah, 3 hours.
Couple martinis.
Right. Find out how many cushy jobs your partner can get from a political contributor or whatever.
Meet a few reporters at Paul's, leak some information,
Right.
back to the grind.
Right. But if you're in the private sector, you're working you're took us off. I mean, you're working really hard. You're typically, even especially perhaps in a middle-level job, you don't leave on Friday and fail to check your email. And you're checking your email at 11 o'clock at night if you're up on Friday. You're checking at 6 o'clock in the morning. You're wondering what's going on. You're wondering if your job's going to get cut. You're wondering if you're going to get any stock options or whatever. You're going to wonder if the firm you're working for is going bankrupt. You're going to wonder as you age, are you going to be discriminated against? It's great when you're 25. Everybody loves the bright young people coming into the workforce. You're a star. You ride that to your 30s. Then suddenly you got to produce business and you can't do it. And you start having family issues, difficult problems with your kids or whatever. Maybe you get divorced. Then, God forbid, you start to be in your 40s, 50s. And then people start saying, why do we need these old people anymore? We don't want 50-year-olds around. They're expensive to fire. Let's get rid of them. And certainly people in their 60s, let's get rid of them. So there's been a crushing assault on, and our viewership knows about it, has nothing to do particularly with your political affiliation, but everything to do with the reality that there's a gigantic surplus of accessible labor around, especially when you count, you've got human labor and you've got machine labor. You've got robots, you've got software taking human labor out of the equation, you got algorithms and all kinds of stuff. So there's if you're a responsible person who's trying to raise children, and let's say you've made the mistake of borrowing too much money for whatever reason, you're living hand to mouth and you don't have any savings, you're living on a knife's edge. And it's some idiot that Professor Gruber is laughing about the fact that Americans are too stupid to understand the genius of the failed Obamacare system, where Hillary Clinton, why aren't I 50 points ahead when I'm not even campaigning because I've rigged the election? I mean, those type of people, it grates. It has nothing to do particularly with racism or sexism or any kind of ism. It's just people are against, I suppose I'm an anti-stupidist. I'm against people who, on that quadrant of high intelligence, low intelligence, high arrogance, low arrogance, you got high arrogance, low intelligence.
I think you're actually entertained by stupidity, or you would stop frequenting some of the coffee places you go to.
That's true, yeah, that's true, yeah, that's true. So that's really what we've been talking about here. The big issue here, we have been afflicted by this New World Order stuff, the 13 BlackBerry crowd, the people who love to go to Davos, the people who will play along with the dynastic political families inside and outside this country, who are concocting deals under the radar, crooked deals that are financed with government money or skirt rules, that because they're not just focused on even a big market like the US, but on the globe, they command a much higher valuation when they win. And so in this game, you need a way to grease the politicians. And the Clinton Foundation and its network of affiliates, in my mind, is the mechanism, one of the mechanisms that has been used. Another one coming into the frame is the Obama Foundation. Arguably the Bush Foundations as well are in a minor way doing some of this, but these are ways for people who want to get on the right side of families that might have other members of the family running for high office, like Michelle Obama maybe, like Hillary Clinton, or God forbid Chelsea Clinton, or the Bushes coming along. You want to get on the right side of these dynastic families. You give them $1 million into their foundation. In the case of the Clinton Foundation, you say you gave them $1 million since nobody's checking. You then go to your tax accountant, your crooked tax accountant, and you say, oh, I just gave $1 million to the Clinton Foundation. And the crooked people in the Clinton Foundation back office say, yep, he did, when he didn't. And so now no one's done an audit of the Clinton Foundation. No one's bothered to do it. So you got Truman the Tiger doing an audit. He can't even speak English.
He's number one.
Yeah. Oh, these financials are great.
Exactly.
So this issue of fake, false front charities, particularly these presidential charities, which are run by a collection of rogue scholars. You've got multiple Rhodes Scholars in this Clinton Foundation. I
think the whole Rhodes Scholar program is an indoctrination of people where they first get you by paying for your schooling, and then you're in it, and you're in this club where they indoctrinate you into this elitist thing. You're smarter than everybody, you're going to be on a great track, have this career, and it's very easy for them to detect who's going along with this and who's not, and the ones that are not become the ones that they target and destroy, and the ones who are get rewarded with more money and more opportunity and more fame, and they just keep doing it.
Well, and on that subject, recently I'm aware that the Clinton Foundation is trashing me. Apparently, they've sent a letter to the various people saying that I am associated with fringe figures like Jerry Corsi, and I have been appearing in Russian-controlled media and this and that. And, I would just like, for the record, on our show, to point out that Bill Clinton was kicked out of the Rhodes Scholar program. He did not finish the Rhodes Scholar program.
Why was he kicked out?
We don't know. And all these mainstream journalists who they need to go back into history and ask, in 1971, which I think is when Bill Clinton, it might have been 71 or 70, they can check the facts, whenever it was in that rough time frame, Bill Clinton did not finish the Rhodes Scholarship program at a time when there was a draft, when he should have been registered for the draft. There was still a war in Vietnam. And because he was in the Rhodes Scholarship program, he was exempt from service. So to take the risk, to make the decision not to complete the Rhodes Scholarship program is highly unusual, because the way the Rhodes Scholarship program works, you have to, it's actually an international program, but back in my day, there were 32 Americans, I believe, chosen to, at the expense of the Rhodes Trust, to go to school in Oxford, and you would pick the college and program you wanted to go to, and the Rhodes Trust would pay for it. And while you were a student, not only would they pay for all your fees and room and board, they would give you a stipend, a monthly check, so that you had, and it sent you over on the Queen Elizabeth, I think, or some fancy ship, first class, and you're a celebrity, and all kinds of articles written about you, a big person on campus. Bill Clinton did not complete the Rhodes Scholarship, did not complete his actual studies, and there are many books written about him. He also spent some time in the Soviet Union while he was with the anti-war movement, which had a lot of extremely suspicious people. Some would argue, tied into the former Soviet Union. So if you want to start putting a microscope on people and their connections to Russia, may I suggest that the people in the mainstream media go to Oxford and find out why it is that Bill Clinton failed to complete his regular studies. Why would you spend It'd be one thing to get over there, and let's say you got there in '69. I was there, not in Oxford, but I was in England in '76, and in London, in a fancy part of London, in Richmond. And you know the thing, and I was staying at Richmond College, which turned out to be a joke. But you know the buildings back then were not insulated. It was very cold, and it's easy to see. I mean, even though it wasn't like cold like in Montana, when it gets down to say 38, 40 degrees, and the buildings aren't insulated, and the heat is not really working, and yeah. And so the whole thing about that, manipulating to get out of the ROTC program. But just staying on England for a second, the facts are clear. Bill Clinton did not finish. He went for almost 2 years, but he dropped out of the Rhodes Scholarship Program in March timeframe of his second year, right before he would have gotten a degree. Now, why would you do that? It just doesn't make any sense. If you've endured Oxford for all that time, you would do whatever it takes to finish and get your degree. So there's got to be an odd reason why he did that. And even odder, Ira Magaziner was a Rhodes Scholar the following year, and he did the same thing. He didn't last for the whole 2-year period. And so mainstream journalists, you know, instead of chasing this collusion delusion, get your asses on a British Airways flight, or if you want to make money for American Airlines, American or United, fly over to England, drive or take the train to Oxford, and pepper the people at Oxford for explanations of why Bill and Ira did not complete their time at Oxford, and then contemplate why was Bill Clinton, what was he doing in the Soviet Union in 1971? That's extremely unusual.
Yeah,
I mean,
1971, you couldn't even really go there.
Yeah, and you know, the Soviets, Oxford was a recruiting ground. If you go back into the scandals, Oxford and Cambridge were recruiting grounds to find impressionable young people to work against the system. You know, what was Bill Clinton doing in the Soviet Union? What did the Americans know about that? What did the American government know about why Bill Clinton never finished his Rhodes Scholarship? Do some real journalism. Do some investigative journalism. Don't go down a track of saying, well, Charles has appeared on RT, Charles has appeared on MTV, Charles has appeared on many different Russian, Charles is doing these columns with Katerina Blanova. And I pointed out to Eric Wemple, the Washington Post, I said, listen, Eric, you know, I was introduced to Katerina Blanova by Utrice Lead, who is, I didn't tell him this, but he'll figure it out. Utrice Lead was the station manager of WBAI. You know, Katerina Blanova is not a news person at Sputnik. She's an independent contractor. She's an historian who does opinion pieces, which she is entitled to do. So I'm not working for the news arm. I'm not working for Russia. I've never taken any money from Russia or anybody else.
But there's a bigger question. Like, so what? Even if you were.
Yeah, but I'm not.
We're not at war with Russia. They haven't, you know, they've just turned Russia into this gigantic, demonic,
right.
Oh no. Like the guy from Google, the CEO from Google said, oh yeah, the Russian influence campaign, they spent $4,700 buying ads on Google.
$4,700? Did that move like the Q3 results for Google or something?
I mean, exactly. I could finance a more dangerous campaign with the Google ads. I mean, that's the thing. Like, they're calling you about WikiLeaks. Did you talk to WikiLeaks? It's like, you didn't, but even if you did, so what?
I didn't.
I know, but I'm saying they keep making it about, it's like Michael Cohen is sentenced today, 3 years in prison, right? And everyone's like, oh, Trump must have done something. His lawyer got sentenced. So now the evidence in some sort of criminal or other type of case against Trump becomes, oh, his lawyer pled guilty to election finance fraud. That becomes the evidence. The fact that Michael Cohen maybe never did election finance fraud or campaign finance fraud, but they got him to plead guilty to that by putting pressure on him, saying, we're going to throw you in jail for 30 years for all these counts of lying to us unless you take this plea deal. Here's a crappy plea deal. He takes the plea deal. This is how they build a house of cards kind of case against somebody.
Right, and that's un-American. I mean, that's in gross violation of the whole. We have a constitution, and you know, I'd like to remind again Eric Wemple and others in the mainstream press, do some homework. You know, go into the Clinton the FBI vault. Look at Hillary R. Clinton, the 28-part dump. Read the letter that a senior State Department spokesman sent directly to James Comey, in which he accuses the President of the United States of directing people to work for him. Damn the Constitution. That, the Constitution doesn't matter. You work for me. I'm the president, in substance, is what the letter, I read it to say. And this guy was, somebody who did not believe that is correct and had worked, I guess, as a careerist under various presidents. No, your job in government is to preserve and protect rights that are enshrined in the Constitution. You don't work for a president. You serve at the pleasure of a president, but within the confines of everybody in government required to follow the Constitution as it is narrowly written, not as it's interpreted by some goofball, at Yale Law School or Harvard Law School. I mean, this is nuts.
So Nega in the comments is asking, didn't Eric Braverman go to work for Alphabet? And I believe what he actually is doing right now is, I think he's the president of something called Schmidt Futures, which is some sort of foundation that sounds very much like what you've described as venture philanthropy. They even have some weird language associated with it on their own webpage. This has become so brazen, their perpetration of these financial crimes, because no one's enforcing.
Because the Clintons get away. Actually, this maybe let's go to this an opportune lead into the "this just in" thing. If we
exactly.
Pull that one up, Jason. We were talking. What I do, because Eric Wemple asked how I should be described, and I said, well, why don't you describe me as
badass?
No, relentless.
Oh.
You can describe me as relentless. Well, you're certainly relentless. But I said, what I do is I do Google the Clinton Foundation multiple times a day, and if you hit this Clinton Foundation link here, look what comes up. Our work at a glance, creating economic opportunity. That is not a charity. Creating economic opportunity, in particular for the Clintons, is not a charity. They are never said in any application, in the early period, they are asked specifically, are you going to be engaged in economic development? And they never said they were going to do economic development. And when you do economic development, that's not necessarily charitable. I mean, creating economic...
I think what they mean is like for poor people.
Well, they don't say that. It's, with the Clintons, these are people who... Bill Clinton was fully prepared on television to debate the meaning of the word "is."
That's true.
So when somebody writes a sentence that says creating economic opportunity, period,
it's like
it probably means creating economic opportunity for two deadbeats who were broke while in the White House and needed to get crooked law firms to, help them pay down their legal bills using crooked schemes in which these law firms seem to have been involved, to have fake charities and a fake legal expense trust commingle their activities without reporting to state and federal and foreign authorities, and raise enough to pay off these overdue legal bills, which seems to me a conflict of interest, which suggests to me if you did have such a scenario, I would have thought you'd want a third law firm involved with the charity that had nothing to do with the idea that you had $14 million in legal bills that needed to be paid off.
That's astounding, $14 million.
But if we just stay on that thing, when you went on it the first time, Jason, what comes up here is, I don't know why it doesn't do it now, but it's soliciting right now. But when you landed on it at first, there was an actual ad that came up. These people are soliciting as we speak. They are breaking the law as we speak, because the attorneys general in the 50 states in this country are gutless. They're not willing to stand up and say, appoint a conservator. These people are brazen. They are fraud. Con artists. They will not listen to anybody. They probably don't listen to their own lawyers and accountants, and they just won't stop stealing money. They won't stop. So somebody has to, is there not one attorney general in this country who will stand up and say, enough, basta. You cannot, solicit in our state. I mean, that happened in Mississippi.
Yeah.
But they haven't told people the full details of what happened in Mississippi. Their own fundraiser was disciplined in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, their original fundraiser, in the early days. They haven't reported that properly. And here's their sites. They're saying that what we do is we create economic opportunity. And in parens, I would add, for the Clinton family, and not for you.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's interesting to see, Charles, that people now come out of the woodwork to, hurl baseless allegations, accusations at you, at me. I mean, no one's challenging this information. They just say a bunch of nonsense that's unfounded and unsupported.
And look, charity watchdogs have awarded and recently renewed top ratings to the Clinton Foundation. Now, we've had Doug White on, who co-founded Charity Navigator, who's disgusted with Charity Navigator. Yeah. And, to go and hire some schmuck to give you, 4 stars. Schmuck gave me 4 stars, so I'm the charity. Why? I got to, Did Schmuck read anything? Of course not. Schmuck is too busy to actually read any of this stuff. I mean, I think it is time for the. There have to be. It's the oldest question in a republic: who regulates the regulator?
Right.
We have to have responsible charity watchdog. I'm able to focus on just a limited number, the Clinton Foundation and its affiliates. I will, in February, have spent 4 years on this project.
Wow.
Okay, I would challenge the Clinton Foundation to tell me one thing I've said, one material thing that I've said that's wrong, and if I've made a mistake, I'll correct it. But I don't think I have on this matter. So if we go into the disclaimer, I know we've.
No, it's all right. I think people like to hear this input, Charles.
So what we try to do here for your new people, and you regularly now seem to have, several hundred new people every few days, so welcome. What we try to do here, what we try to do is provide you a mixture of Jason's wizardry with my boring board presentation style, and what we do, what you would do in a board presentation is, typically when I used to do them, you would have a short presentation because directors don't like to get a pile of paper like this to go through.
Judges don't like that either, apparently.
Right. And so what we would, back in the day, we had a rule that no more than 20 slides, and that has since been cut. Some people say no more than 10, other people say only 1 or 2. But you typically try to provide on a serious matter when you're advising a board, and there's one way to do it and an alternative way to do it, and you got to go through pros and cons. You do this type of a presentation where you lay out some of the issues, you give links to the source material, which we've been doing. This is our 126th show, so average presentation is probably 8 pages of meat, which means there's probably 1,000 pages of actual meat that are out there for the people who say, there are no details, this Ortel, all he does is talk. That's not true. I mean, I do talk, but there's a lot of detail, and there's a lot of stuff for people to see. And today we're going to take some of the high road points that I hope will be covered in depth by the whistleblowers when they speak tomorrow starting at 2 p.m.
Right.
But this is, we're explaining our approach. We rely on publicly available material. We try to check that which we can check. And we give you, the viewer, listener, the opportunity to go. You could check all this stuff, please do. Please tell us if you've got constructive suggestions, please contact me. I don't know, did you put up the playlist already, Jason?
I have not yet, but let's take a look at it.
It's really something.
Yeah, we've got all of the videos assembled in this convenient playlist. As you said, Charles, today is the 126th, so people can go to the Jason Goodman YouTube channel. That's the original home of Crowdsource the Truth, and we've got all the Sunday with Charles and all of the Charles Ortel is Closing In videos in the convenient playlist, so people can watch for hours on end. And of course, as I said, there's the backup channel, Crowdsource the Truth 2, where people can utilize Super Chat, and there's no advertising whatsoever on the main Crowdsource the Truth channel, and people can just go through all those videos.
Yeah, and one thing I would point out, we've said it before, but to the new viewers, this is a topic, and I'm not saying this only because I have a book agent and I intend to write a general purpose, 1 or more general purpose books, if I'm allowed to do it, and maybe some academic textbook type books and case studies and stuff. Because the Clinton Foundation has been operating illegally outside of Little Rock in many, many countries, in many, many different ways. There are lots of different slices that you can expose of, this opportunity sounded good on paper, but it actually was illegitimate for these reasons. This one, a different reason, this a different reason. So there's lots of different things that you can learn from. And as I've said in the beginning, the one way to teach how to run a charity properly is to look at the Clinton Foundation and just do exactly the opposite of what they do.
Order the chicken salad.
Exactly right. Everything that the Clinton Foundation does, just do the opposite.
Yeah.
Chances are you'll be okay.
Yeah. But I think actually it was pointed out that chicken salad is not the opposite of tuna salad. That's pretty close.
That's something we ought to get a PhD to write a dissertation on that one.
Now, Charles, people can follow you on Twitter at Charles Ortel. There's constantly lots of timely information that you're putting up there, and for people who can't get enough of Charles on Wednesdays and Sundays, Twitter is a good way to to stay on top of the things that Charles is looking at, from the Clinton Foundation to General Electric to Trump, Mueller, Comey, Putin, all this stuff. It's a wonderful Twitter profile to follow, and you're up to 34,000 followers there, Charles, so that's good. It looks like perhaps Jack Dorsey has moved on to harassing other people. It's also worth mentioning that Al-Walid bin Talal has a over $1 billion investment in Twitter.
Does he really?
Yeah, so when we see, you know, people that we know and like Laura Loomer, getting kicked off of Twitter, and other people being suppressed. It's, you know, Michael Moore has spoken to us about problems he's had with Twitter, so it's not much of a surprise when we find out who's behind it.
Yeah. Good. So let's get into the meat here, so more meat, as it were. This is really fascinating. If we hit this first link, Zero Hedge once a year puts out a listing of their most actively followed stories. This is a story that appeared on the 8th, I think, at 9:20 in the morning. It says it has 105,000 shares.
Wow.
So rough metric is that typically for every 100 people who view something, one will share it, is a metric I've been told. So multiply 105,000 times 100, and that's a rough estimate of, you know, how many people may have somehow looked at this.
Many millions,
but down below there's a smaller number. Some stories are more popular than others. This, I think, shows that 1.3 million views have been recorded of this story on Zero Hedge.
Wow.
Or 1.344775,
Huh.
with 1,048 comments. And this, I would guess, will definitely be among the top 25 most popular stories already in 2018, with more to come. So the objective the whistleblowers had was to make I believe one of the objectives was to make their appearance tomorrow and the substance that they're going to come across with be the issue, not their identities.
Right.
So far their identities have not been disclosed, and we'll see how that happens and what pieces may emerge.
Marcia Zarelli says, fascinating, but no action. And I mean, you know, we're moving towards that action. There's nothing that Charles and I can do beyond bringing this information to people and raising awareness. Of course, the action needs to be taken by law enforcement and various.
With respect, there already has been action. In order to get this hearing across the line, the whistleblowers provided a fair amount of information to the committee and to the staff. And people have had an opportunity to review this information. John Solomon, who wrote the story, has done a tremendous amount of work checking the claims of the whistleblowers, checking into their backgrounds. These are wonderful human beings. You'll meet them, two of them, I think, tomorrow. Meanwhile, we have the great Richard Pollack story, and I've done quite a bit with him on the Clinton Foundation. Richard is an Emmy Award-winning television guy whose first love is investigative reporting, and he's working with this gentleman named Cain, C-I-A-N, who was a protected whistleblower, and the FBI raided his home.
And then a YouTube journalist went and stood on his street,
Yeah,
I think, to intimidate.
I would say YouTube contributor.
Yes, YouTube faker.
But so this should alarm people of all. I mean, if this is actually a protected whistleblower, to have the FBI show up with a whole bunch of agents at his home is outrageous. You know.
Well, it frightens other people from not wanting to be whistleblowers.
Right, and so that's got to change. We've got to have, you know, under the Obama administration, we know from Cheryl Atkinson, you know, that the way she was treated. We know the Obama administration. And if we had any real journalists in the mainstream, they would go and compare and contrast. You know, what happened to journalists under the Obama administration? Was James Rosen, you know, targeted? Was Cheryl Atkinson targeted? Did they go after James Rosen's father? Yes, they did.
Wow.
You know, and that's an affront, frankly. To now, of course, there are rogue journalists, in quotes, or people passing themselves off as journalists who really aren't journalists. I don't claim to be a journalist. I'm somebody who's investigating the Clinton Foundation at my own expense. I'm not looking to make money off of this investigation. I am certainly looking to make money off a book if I write a book about charity land, or if I write any kind of book. Obviously, You know, other people make money. I'm not looking to get a $15 million advance the way the Clintons did, or
What about 65?
You know, the way the Obamas did, which it seems not to be a market rate.
You don't want to drone innocent people, Charles?
No, I'm not into
You don't
that.
want to deal in depleted uranium and other banned chemical weapons?
Not particularly, no.
Oh, then you shouldn't run for president.
So this is pretty funny. This is an example of what the Clintons like to call pre-butting, this third piece here.
Pre-what?
Pre-butting. So you rebut something in advance.
Ah, instead of rebutting.
Will Trump AG pick, stand against hate, people for the American way?
What is
that? This is, to me, if we hit that X, you'll get rid of it. Yeah. Will Trump AG pick act on right-wing anti-Hillary trope fueled by Bannon and Mercer money?
What is this?
Trying to argue that Peter the Great, Peter Schweitzer's work in Clinton cash, because he was taking a salary from the Government Accountability Institute, which was funded by the very rich, in part by the Mercer family, that's evil. Well, let's take a step back here. I mean, exactly how did the Clintons go from being $14 million in debt while being president and first lady of the United States to having a net worth of $100 million or more? How did they do that? I mean, they've disclosed some of their taxes, but how do you use a charity to become a centimillionaire? You know, how did you get all these sweetheart deals? You know, that's what Peter Schweitzer, in writing the book Clinton Cash, was urging people to focus on. And I would bet if you look under this rock, if we look and find whatever this People for the American Way is, we'll find an example of another false charity. It's probably some kind of charity.
This right-wing watch?
A project of People for the American Way. If you hit about, let's just look and see what it says.
They wrote something nasty about me not long ago that wasn't true.
Right-wing watch?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Is a project of People for the American Way, dedicated to monitoring and exposing the activities and rhetoric of right-wing activists in order. Okay, let's hit this WWPFAW.org and see what type of an entity it is. Is it a 501c3 or a 501c4?
Where do you see that?
Right here. Let's take a look at this thing. Okay, about us. Again, it says here, renew early to get a membership. Hit the X. If you hit the About Us on the left, it doesn't say what it is.
Overview?
What about Support Us? On the far right, typically. Monthly giving. Let's see what that says.
Where do you see giving?
Monthly giving, or donate is the first. Your monthly gift. Okay, you're giving to what? Is this another? Here, donate FAQ. What kind of a charity is this?
They don't know who they just started messing with.
Yeah, let's just see. Tax deductible. Because we lobby state to protect freedom are not tax deductible. Okay. Click here to make a contribution to People for the American Way. Our affiliated educational organization is classified as a 501c3 organization. I question how a 501c3 organization that criticizes only right-wing people can get a tax-exempt designation. Now, maybe it's possible. There are a lot of smart lawyers in Washington. Maybe you can do this. But this is not
a political purpose.
Right, I'd like to see the paper. Well, we have other things we're doing at the moment, but I may decide to take a look at this. I've already reported Media Matters to the New York State Attorney General, knowing full well they're not going to do anything about it, but that's a complete fraud.
Yeah.
Maybe this is an example of yet another charitable fraud.
It could well be. I wonder. There's a lot of that going around, Charles.
That's right. So this is the story, most recent story that appeared in The Hill by John Solomon. Now, John Solomon is somebody I've met through the course of life. He was kind enough to have me write for him at the Washington Times, which I did for a short period. And I view him as a very skilled investigative reporter. He covered the Clinton Foundation years before I did. He had an article, I think, in 2007, where he identified governments that had contributed to the Clinton Foundation, but then he did not have the benefit of seeing their 990, their tax form for 2007, which is false and materially misleading and omits, for example, on the line concerning government contributions, it's blank. And John didn't know that because it hadn't been filed yet. But I mean, John has a long-standing familiarity with the Clinton Foundation. He's written fantastic stuff in many different ways. He is now connected to these 3 whistleblowers, and this is an article that flags some, and not really the most, just some of the many issues and failures to report properly in a number of the different states. Now, what people need to understand with a charity is that when you operate a charity that's going to solicit money from other people across state lines using telephone, mail, or media, electronic means, you have to be aware of federal laws which require you to only solicit while materials that describe your charity are accurate. If you have false and materially misleading information about your charity in the public domain while you're soliciting, not collecting, soliciting money, you are guilty for each request of money 1 count of fraud. Okay, and it can be more than 1 count, but at least 1 count of fraud. Then that's at a federal level. Then in an individual state, each state has different rules. In some states like New York and California, and we're going to give you a portal at the end of this to New York and California, you can see some of the frauds already that are operating as we speak with the Clinton Foundation. You have to respect state laws. You don't automatically get, as a donor in New York State, when you give money to the Clinton Foundation, an Arkansas charity, you are not entitled to take a New York State tax deduction unless the Clinton Foundation has complied with New York law, which it certainly has not. So you can try to take your deduction, but you stand a risk that because of this work of the whistleblowers and others, that someday you're going to get a call from your tax account saying, you know what, we just got a call from the IRS. There's been a global settlement here against the Clinton Foundation. You've taken umpty-ump deductions in these 15 recent years. You're subject to audit. We suggest that you refile your returns because it's a material amount relative to the total. You know, so this Clinton Foundation, I would argue, and I've argued to the FBI recently and to Washington Post hours ago and on many podcasts, in my mind, this is at least a $100 billion fraud when you count all its tentacles, its affiliates. It could be more than that. I estimate the Madoff fraud to be about $50 billion before recoveries.
Wow.
So you're talking twice the size of Madoff. At least with Madoff, you don't go to a character like Madoff who's, you know, just, if you don't think Madoff is sketchy, just listening to it. It has nothing to do with his background, his ethnic orientation. It's just the way he talks. He can't look you straight in the eye. He's very shifty. His argument didn't make any sense.
Did you ever meet him personally?
I never met him, but I did meet some of his team who were going to leave to try to do an investment fund. I just did not like, you know, my ex-partner, I won't mention his name, he was all enamored with this. Oh, this is great, they have fantastic returns. We'll give you, can you check them? Well, we can't check them. So how do you know they're fantastic? Anyway, that didn't happen. So this is, in monetary terms, twice the size, but it's far worse than that, at least with an investment fund. You don't go to a sketchy character, and you should never give anybody all of your money to invest. It's just rule 1 in investing is if you're going to invest, let other people invest your money, you spread it around because you never know. People change. People change, you know, and the last thing you want to do is put money with the so-called superstar fund because superstar funds typically explode. And somebody who goes to you like, I love that guy, I'm not saying he's a fraudster, but that guy, J.D. Melberg, or another guy who's, anyone who's advertising on television for your money is probably not very good at investing.
Right.
You know, so that's another rule. But people would put all their money with Madoff, and they weren't doing it because they wanted to lose money. They thought they were getting a privilege. That's the way Madoff, you know, look, we don't let people into our fund ordinarily, Jason, you know, with this opportunity's come along, and we're not sure that you qualified to be, so don't get your hopes up. We may not let you be part of this.
Right.
And there's a certain element that says, oh,
I
exclusive
want to be part
club?
of it, right.
I mean, I want to be part of this. I'm a member of the Admirals Club. You know.
I want to call foot faults on George Soros.
Yeah, well, that club is very nice. I'm talking about stupid clubs. Like, why would anybody pay, you know, a lot of money to have, I don't know, to be in the Super Admirals Club at American Airlines, but there are all these different clubs. You don't need to do that. And anyway, we have some characterization in this Real Clear Politics video. Mark Meadows has been doing the rounds. If we hit, yeah.
Did that? Oh, it came over here. Sorry.
It's okay.
It's hard to know sometimes where these things will appear, Charles.
So this is a story about the whistleblowers. Mark Meadows is characterizing some of their work. And he's suggesting that tomorrow we're going to hear about pay for play and quid pro quo at the Clinton Foundation. Well, we'll see. Tomorrow we'll see. I don't know if it's going to be televised by, I can safe bet it's not going to be televised by CBS, NBC,
Well,
CNN,
C-SPAN probably, right?
I don't know about C-SPAN, but it might be televised by Fox. It might be live streamed. I think it'll certainly get some attention, and I'm hopeful that the actual evidence will come to light as well. I mean, or portions of it will actually be.
So
made
these
public.
are the guys that are going to be in there, Whitaker?
No, this is a story saying these people are trying to expose the Clinton Foundation.
Chris Christie?
I guess this is what this is. Mark Meadows being interviewed by Martha McCallum, I believe.
Real clear politics there.
So there's going to be, people say nothing's happening. Something's happening. I mean, despite all these problems, the Clinton Foundation is still soliciting illegally. It's just, this is the page. Look at this. Donate today and the Clinton family, will match your gift dollar for dollar up to $200,000. Well, how are they going to do that? And note to Bill, probably not a great move to have somebody wearing a blue anything, in your picture there. And let alone somebody who sort of bears a somewhat resemblance to Monica Lewinsky a little bit with her hair. And they're probably not the smartest choice here, guys. But, the notion that you're going to give money, that you're going to solicit money, help the Clinton Foundation improve lives. Query, which of the 5 people pictured there, which lives are likely to be improved? Probably the guy in the center with the shit-eating grin. Well, I'll take that money.
He's like, oh, I love interns.
Yeah. It's amazing to me. And here we have this stupid Charity Navigator. I would sue the living crap out of Charity Navigator if I were a donor.
And perhaps that will happen. There's
Let's
still
hope.
time.
We've heard Lindsey Graham here call for a second special counsel. And here, I like the new Lindsey Graham, but I would like to take issue with I think he's the senior senator from South Carolina. I don't think one should investigate all things Clinton at all, just like I don't think you should investigate all things Trump. I think you need to investigate
crimes,
Clinton Foundation charity frauds, enormous bank fraud, financial statement fraud. That's what you need to, not the Clintons per se. This is a presidential charity. This is a former president and an aspiring president and a dopey daughter going around the world suggesting she might bother to run for office. Maybe if there's nobody else there, they're retiring. She might be willing to consider running for office. These are people who cannot argue that they didn't know better. That they fell off a turnip truck or whatever, a beet truck from sugar beet truck from Arkansas or a rice paddy. They ate too much. What do they call it? Roadkill at that.
the raccoon barbecue that they were having.
They just said, I didn't know about charity law.
Charles, Christopher Joseph wants to know if you think that Hillary will stay in India, the Maldives. They don't have an extradition treaty with the U.S. and she can nurse her Indian wedding hangover on the beach.
Well, did we do, I know we did Slumdog Billionaires. We've got to do, there's another one. What's that one?
The Hotel whatever?
No, there's yet another one, something, marriage or something. The name will come to me. I love it in India. My last trip, and again, I told this to the FBI, so let me just nip this. Charles Ortel visited Julian Assange in London. I have not been outside the United States of America since June of 2012. The last trip, I spent 90 days in a 5-star hotel in Bangalore, a few weekends in nicer other places. But
I don't think you've gone above 49th Street in the time that I've known you.
I have actually. I've been up to like 86th Street, or 90th maybe.
Do you have the stamp in your passport?
I don't.
Central Park, they got it.
But, so I certainly did not go to London, and I don't know Julian Assange. I don't know who his lawyers are. I know a lot of lawyers around the world. It's possible I would know somebody who might work for him, maybe, but I certainly made no effort to try to see him, and I most certainly, NBC actually retracted the story. They published a story saying I had gone to London to meet with Julian Assange.
Really?
Yeah.
When did they publish that?
A number of weeks ago, and I immediately contacted the person.
I didn't see that. See, I'm telling you, Charles, that whole Paul Manafort went to see Julian Assange. That was supposed to be you, and they were like, "We got nothing. Stick Manafort in there. He's the punching bag." They've been angling to get you. They've been trying to do whatever they can, but you are smarter than the average bear.
Well, it's not that. It's just I'm trying to. First of all, I'm not, as I told Wemple, and I tell everybody, I did not vote in 2016. You know, I'm not.
Irrespective of that, I think the first of all is you haven't done anything wrong.
Yeah, exactly. No. Well, I may have done things wrong, but I mean,
no crimes.
I'm divorced. I've got whatever. But everyone makes mistakes. But on this matter, my view. All along, when I figured out in February, March timeframe 2015 that this was a massive fraud, which I did figure out, I wrote a story, March 16th, 2015, that hasn't gotten attention, saying Hillary Clinton effectively will never be president of the United States. March 16th, 2015. I appreciated it then. I appreciated how powerful, I still appreciate how powerful the Clintons are, the hold they have over the gullible media who walk around and say, "Oh, we're in the mainstream media. You know, you wrote for Breitbart. I write for the Washington Post." Yeah, you write fiction for the Washington Post. You know, and nobody believes half of what you're saying anyway. So anyway, Opie Graham is, and I should be nice to him. He has done a lot of good work, some bad work, but he is now potentially calling for a second special counsel. I think that absolutely has to be the case. It's not to investigate the Clintons per se, is to investigate why, going back to 2001 under Bush, why this Clinton Foundation fraud was not exposed before the Clintons defrauded the National Archives on November 18th, 2004. Why did Rod Rosenstein elect, when he was in justice from 2001 to 5, and had some purview over which tax frauds got prosecuted, why didn't he go after this when it was under investigation? Why did Comey miss it? First as U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, and second as the guy running the FBI. He was Mueller's boss as the Deputy Attorney General of the United States from 2003 to 2005. Why didn't Mueller stop this thing in its tracks when it had no freaking audit? You know, it's ridiculous.
Well, I like the idea of getting a special counsel to investigate the special counsel, primarily because it reminds me of the time that Porky Pig checked into a hotel that was run by Daffy Duck, and there was a mouse. So he called down and they send up a cat, and then he calls down and they send up a dog, and then it doesn't really solve the problem, this constant, special counsel investing special counsel upon special counsel.
You do realize you've just created an assignment for yourself, because you're going to have to put heads on that thing.
Daffy Duck investigating Robert Mueller.
You're going to have to do that. So anyway, now this is a story that just appeared in Zero Hedge, where apparently it's come out that the FBI apparently may have told Michael Flynn, "You don't need a lawyer." Which, if that's true, to ditch the lawyer during the interview, if that's true, then the FBI has a lot of explaining to do here.
I think it's clear that they have a lot of explaining to do. I mean, it seems to be a regular pattern and practice for the FBI to just entrap people and lie to subjects to get them to do whatever they need to categorize it as this 18 USC 1001 and charge them with nonsense. There was some other article I saw online earlier today about how all of these Mueller indictments are just replete with this 1001, which is, false statements to federal investigators. And my question is, and everyone is putting into the comments here, Charles, that they think you should have had a lawyer when you spoke to the FBI. I'm just saying, I think it should be recorded. James O'Keefe had a victory in court just the other day where a Massachusetts judge determined that it's unconstitutional to disallow the secret recording of government employees. Because, if the FBI is operating on the up and up, there should be no problem with someone hearing a recording of the interview. The fact that they don't want it recorded and that we're just relying on the written 302 statement from an FBI agent, well, here we have one of the most famous liars who's worked for the FBI, who lacks candor he could lack candor and say, well, Charles told me he was sipping tea with Julian Assange and the Queen.
Yeah, well, nice try. That's not going to work.
But if they did do that, couldn't they get in court?
People could do anything, right? I mean, I can't. And what I've learned the hard way is that when you stop trying to control other people's behavior, having a lawyer there would not necessarily stop crooked people. And I have to say, the two people who did interview me, they may be great actors, and they may be, actually super crooked. They didn't seem to be that. Wait, I was prepared. I'm a grown-up. I'm trying to expose the largest unprosecuted fraud in world history. I'm going to do what I have to do that. I got a chance to get these agents to understand what I was doing, I hope. And I think I made the right...
that's a pretty important step
Yeah.
in the whole investigation. I mean, we know the rubber is about to meet the road.
It is, as it were.
Yeah.
So you remember when Macron dissed President Trump recently under the Arc de Triomphe, and he got up there and all high and mighty, and I think France is in turmoil. It's turmoiling, as they say.
Yeah, that's clear. I mean, we saw.
And Theresa May just survived the no confidence vote in the UK Parliament. But,
wow.
But Macron, I don't know that he may or may not survive.
When did that come about?
Just happened just now.
So they can just have a no confidence vote. I wonder why the Democrats haven't tried to do that with Trump. Because they probably know he would win again, and they'd look like idiots.
Well, first they're going to have to choose a speaker, and that could prove rather interesting. I wasn't overwhelmed by Nancy Pelosi's performance with Chuck Schumer in the Oval Office. I think that Donald Trump.
Sorry, Charles.
It's okay. Go ahead.
There's something else important about what's going on with Macron. He's trying to blame these yellow vest protests on social media influenced by Russia. So there's this recurring, we need to pay attention to this stuff, because whether we're talking about dopes in the mainstream media or dopes in social media, I believe they are aligned now because they recognize the power of social media. When you and I can get together on a no budget kind of a thing and get millions of views for a message that's obviously now getting into Congress, he's putting out this message that social media is the problem. We see Alex Jones kicked off of social media platforms by Google, Apple, Twitter, Facebook, colluding. Okay, and what did Hillary say about the assault on the CIA compound in Benghazi? She said that it was caused by a YouTube video. But the Moriartys have told us you can't even get YouTube in Libya, so how would that be possible?
Yeah, again, with Hillary Clinton, it's a kind of thing, you make fun of the places where I have breakfast coffee, and I'm actually rather upset with McDonald's because they raised the price of a large cup of coffee by 60%.
I wish you wouldn't go there. It's a terrible place.
I don't know.
60%, that's a lot.
I know. That's
How do
a big
they
number.
Justify that?
They don't. It's like, we're McDonald's. You want your coffee somewhere else? Get it at Starbucks where it tastes like, dirt water. Starbucks coffee is very, very harsh, I find.
I just don't. Yeah.
But anyway, there's a large number of people, without describing them too well, who have more going for them than Hillary Clinton to run for president. I mean, if you think about the bad choices that Hillary Clinton has made in her long life, staying with Bill Clinton, deciding to cheat, every which way from Sunday with her charity, putting her family and her daughter with few qualifications in direct control of a public charity in gross violation of the law starting November 2nd, 2013, and then lying about it around the world, including to the trustees. She brought it to them. This is somebody, I wouldn't follow this person, to a meeting where any attendee would get $1 million in gold for fear that was a ruse as well. I mean, this is a person who has demonstrated remarkably poor judgment. And is no more qualified to be president of the United States than that person who used to stand in the middle of Park Avenue in the median yelling up and imploring people to, he looked like Jesus Christ, to follow Jesus the Lord. I mean,
here's the Dems 2020. the
Truman.
Best candidate,
Yeah,
Truman the Tiger. Well, I mean, the point I was getting at, Charles, is I think that there's been a buildup to what they would like, which is total censorship of the internet.
Oh, that's not going to happen.
But that's what they want.
Yeah, but it's not going to happen. That ain't happening.
Yeah.
So some people know that before I began the Clinton Foundation crusade, and I made this clear to Eric Wemple at the Washington Post, I'm an anti-fraud guy. And I focus people at lunch, I say, well, why aren't you going once you get done with the Clinton Foundation, you're going to talk about the Trump Foundation? And I say, you know, yeah, there's some problems with the Trump Foundation, but it's tiny compared to the Clinton Foundation. It's a $20 million problem. We're talking about a $2.8 billion problem minimum in the main Clinton Foundation, all affiliates, $100 billion. This is an interesting story in Zero Hedge. They have been tracking my work and tracking GE independently of me. But you know, GE is one I started dogging again in February of 2007. Wrote my first detailed research because somebody asked me to do that, and I want to say in August of 2007 or thereabouts. I may have written some interim pieces. And this is a stock which, when I began on it in 2007, was trading at $40 a share. It hasn't split. It went down to the ominous 666 in March 2009. It didn't close on the day at 666, I don't think. It closed at 706, I think was its low.
Oh,
But
Charles, look at where it is right now. It's dancing in the danger zone.
where is it? Where is it now? I can't see.
671.
Did it close at 671? Because
Has it closed? Yeah, it's 625. So I guess, yeah, close. Well, no, it says previous close 6.77. I guess that's after hours.
I can't really see that from here. So
It's 6.77 USD. Closed December 12th.
that's where it closed, 677 or 671.
671. After hours 673.
At 671, it's headed the wrong way. And this, I would encourage, as I encouraged Eric Wemple, I said, just Google me with General Electric, and you will see. I've been on the General Electric campaign. I'm not done with them yet until they file for bankruptcy, which they really need to do.
General Electric came up earlier today in my show with David Hawkins. They seem to have been buying and selling satellite companies and there was this thing called Axis Graphics that John Benet Ramsey's father was the founder and CEO of, and that was purchased by Northrop Grumman. And the ransom note dealing with John Benet's murder wanted $118,000 in $100 bills, and he had just been given a $118,000 bonus from Northrop Grumman.
Very interesting.
And then it was bought by GE, so that's quite strange.
So here we have this old question: who regulates the regulators? If we hit this, this is really hysterical. This is in the Washington Post. It's a foundation face-off, the Trump Foundation versus the Clinton Foundation. If we look further down the page at the date and the author, Glenn Kessler, it was a biased checker, June 27th, I think this year. Basically, June 27th this year, the cut to the punchline, this tries to claim, the Washington Post, this idiot, Glenn Kessler, tries to claim that the Clinton Foundation is a good charity and the Trump Foundation is a bad charity. Now, I haven't gone through the Trump filings the way I might, so I'm not intimately familiar with the Trump, but the allegations that were made in the suit against the Trump Foundation are serious allegations that should be taken seriously. And if the Trumps have a defense, let them make it. But the allegations against the Clinton Foundation are provable and true. And the real question is, why the hell haven't multiple attorneys general at federal and state and foreign level, why the hell haven't they forced the Clinton Foundation trustees to be kicked out and replaced by a conservator who could protect the true interests of this foundation, whose only authorized purpose is to operate in activities in Little Rock, Arkansas, connected to housing the presidential records of the Clinton presidency and allowing scholars across the political spectrum to study those records. That's the only thing this thing is authorized to do. Right, so when we talk about the Clinton Foundation, note to the Washington Post and others, you're not just talking about one charity. You're talking about a large number of purported charities. This is only the ones the major ones inside the United States of America. There are other ones, okay, and especially outside the United States of America. And we don't have time to go through all of the many charities around the world. But let's just start in Congress with these. How many of these charities have actually filed reports that are true and proper in the various states and with the IRS and others? None of them. Okay, none of these things have submitted accurate and complete results, and you can see that through the some 1,000 pages of schedules we've already provided you and the 125 other shows that we've already done on the subject.
I misspoke earlier. It was Lockheed Martin that purchased Access Graphics, not Northrop Grumman. But
Okay.
that's Lockheed Martin. Our friend James Comey was working there, wasn't he?
General counsel. Made a lot of money off him.
When was he working there?
I think he worked there after 2005. Between 2005 and 2013, James Comey had a number of jobs. He worked for a large hedge fund. He worked for Lockheed Martin. I think he also may have had something to do as an advisory. It was either he or Mueller who was on the advisory board of HSBC. So there's a lot of questionable. James Comey's resume is, question central. There's a lot of questions about him. So if we go to the, well, actually, before we go off this, it's important, and I put a link to this. Was described as an epic, Zero Hedge described it as, I say there's an epic smackdown of the Clinton Foundation or something, but there's a lot of meat in this attachment that people, if they haven't done it before, need to read.
You mean your slide presentation?
No, this is a text, actually. If you go further down in here, it's actually, I actually took the trouble to write
For some reason, Zero Hedge is not responding today.
This one has only 295,000 views, and so it's not like the 1.3 million for the whistleblowers. But here's a bunch of information that I put together right before the 90-day window. It was 24 pages, I guess. You can see you can read it. You can follow links.
We could download it.
Yeah, and you can download it. And I decided not to circulate this dual test, the organized and operated, is very important. The operational test concerns the organization's activities. A deficiency in an organization's governing document cannot be cured by the organization's actual operations. Likewise, an organization whose activities are not within the statute will not qualify for exemption by virtue of a well-written charter. Okay, this is direct from the IRS manual for regulating charities. I didn't invent this. This is when the IRS wants to go against a charity, a rogue charity. This is what they focus on, the dual test. Is it organized and operated lawfully? The Clinton Foundation, in particular the main one, was not organized lawfully. It was not operated lawfully. It is not operating lawfully now. It is soliciting illegally as we speak, as we've demonstrated. Why the F aren't you doing something about it?
But didn't the Trump Foundation also pay some kind of fine or do whatever they needed to do to straighten out whatever the problem?
A large fine, $20 million fine.
Has the Clinton Foundation done anything along those lines?
They've paid smaller fines, but nothing approaching 20 million. The Clinton Foundation, in my judgment, the record is clear, it is not a not-for-profit entity. It is a for-profit corporation that should have been shut down long ago. It needs to refile corporate tax returns, pay corporate income tax. The IRS needs to go after donors and get their tax, however they decide to do it. We need to close the budget deficit. They need to go after Bill Gates' foundation, the big private foundations, and get large sums of money back.
What do you think about this tactic, Charles, of you say, hey, the Clinton Foundation has done this list of things, and someone doesn't say, well, you're wrong for this reason, that reason, and the other reason. They say, oh, but Trump did this. It's like, that's not a defense.
I know, it's absurd. It's basically absurd and childish play.
Perhaps we should look at the Trump Foundation just to understand what it is.
So it's very clear under Arkansas law and many state laws that you cannot, we've explained to people before the way that I believe the laws work. An individual cannot be a charity. A charity has to be under New York law, Arkansas law, most state laws. It's got to be either an organization, a formal association with a charter, or a trust. And the Clinton Foundation chose to be a non-for-profit, not-profit corporation, a non-profit corporation based in Arkansas. Arkansas law specifically requires that there be no fewer than 3 trustees at any time. You can see this is Article 8. This has never been amended, to my knowledge. At least if it has, the Clinton Foundation is deficient in notifying multiple states of the change, because you're required to notify any state where you solicit of a material change, as well as the IRS. So I don't believe this has been amended in the articles. In the bylaws, they tried to amend the way they call They like to call what used to be called trustees, they want to call them directors, but they didn't make the required change in the Articles of Incorporation. The Articles of Incorporation controls the bylaws and not the reverse. So you can't effect the change via the bylaws in contravention of the Articles. It's basic law. You can't do that. But the Clintons tried to do that. So anyway, in 99, the Clinton Foundation claimed, and this is something filed in 2000, that they had only 2 trustees. Okay, people can look at this. I mean, they filed this thing in multiple states with the IRS, and they said, look, we've only got 2 trustees. We're the Clintons. So they have admitted that during 1999, they gutted the Clinton Foundation by only having 2 trustees when you're required at all times to have at least 3. In addition, the 2 that they named,
Sorry, Charles.
it's okay. Skip Rutherford, the president, was working for an entity. If we hit this bio of Skip Rutherford, we see that Skip Rutherford was chairman of the Arkansas Democratic Party. He was working for Senator David Pryor, another trustee. He was working for an entity that was doing work for the Clinton Foundation, and I believe being compensated for the Clinton Foundation, and he didn't disclose any of that in the Clinton Foundation stuff. And in addition, he went from being, in theory, an unpaid director and president of the Clinton Foundation to being, I believe, the 2nd dean of the Clinton School of Public Service, where he still is, and I think where he collects his salary. Maybe he has expense reimbursement and a pension and this and that. And all of that needs to be disclosed because the Clinton School of Public Service shares facilities with the Clinton Foundation. It operates on land that is within the Clinton Presidential Center. There is an arrangement that was entered into in theory, or should have been entered into, between the Clinton Foundation or among the Clinton Foundation, Little Rock, and the School of Public Service, and maybe other parties, that has never been made public, and we need to see that. So this guy is certainly not independent. Okay, then we go to David Pryor, if we go back into the slide. He's a longtime senator, and then he was briefly chairman of the Democratic Party in 2008 when the then Democrat, chairman of the Democratic Party was murdered, execution style, in August.
Was that?
I forget the guy's name. In August of 2008, somebody walked into the office and shot him dead, and then the cops shot the murderer.
That's crazy.
Right before the convention, where there were rumors that Hillary was going to, fight Obama.
Wow.
And here's a story that goes on and on and on about saying that this is pretty funny. The trust was headquartered in a nondescript 7th floor office on Vermont Avenue in Washington, D.C., high above the display window of Al's Magic Shop. I mean, this is the 2nd presidential legal expense trust, which registered in Maryland. We've done shows about this. In 1998, I believe, they claimed they were a charity, when of course they were not a charity. And they were obviously commingling staff. David Pryor was chairman of this legal expense trust and one of 2 named trustees of the Clinton Foundation. He was in charge of the mailing. He brags in this article and elsewhere about the amounts of money that were raised, their solicitations. This was a political solicitation that he was doing at the same time as being one of the only true trustees of the Clinton Foundation. And the fact that he was doing this work was not noticed to the IRS in the 1023 for the Clinton Foundation, where there are sections that deal, are there any related partisan political activities that you're involved with? And of course, the 2nd Presidential Expense Trust was contemplated by the time the Clinton Foundation was officially approved by the IRS on January 29th, 1998, because solicitations began in February of 1998 for the 2nd Legal Expense Trust. So under Clinton, of course, he's beginning to fight impeachment in 98. And using the Republican assault on him in the mid-year elections in '98, with Hillary's involvement, of course they're engaged in partisan political activity. And Bill controls the presidency. He's got his people in the IRS and Justice. So nobody did anything about this.
Right.
But they need to do something about this. So if we go back into the slides. We have this story in here. This is interesting. I don't know if it'll come up properly. Yeah, this is a consent agreement and order. O'Brien, McConnell, and Pearson was the Clinton Foundation's main fundraiser. And you look down here a bit further. Respondent was registered as a professional fundraising council in Pennsylvania, February 13th, 97 through 99, and then March 23rd, 99 through March 23rd, 2000. and it was doing work for the Clinton Foundation. We have their agreements. They're
But isn't
filed
there
with
a
certain
thing
states.
about lots of rules if you hire a professional fundraiser?
You cannot hire a professional fundraiser that has been disciplined in a state for breaking the law, soliciting money in a state like the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, without disclosing in every other state that you did this, that you used. Have you used a professional fundraiser in the past that has broken
That is a
fundraising
criminal.
laws?
Right.
You probably should say yes if you did that. Here's a consent order in 2002 that has never been actually noticed to all the many states where this Clinton Foundation operated. And curiously, we're going to get into this in some depth, when you go onto the Clinton Foundation 990s, their annual returns, they magically claim that they were able to do massive fundraising without paying for any postage, without having any professional fundraising fees. And yet this entity, we have the contracts that show that this entity was indeed retained by the Clinton Foundation on a basis where the Clinton Foundation was required to pay for postage.
I mean,
So-
this notion of like, has your professional fundraiser broken the fundraising laws is a little bit like, I mean, hiring a babysitter and checking off the have you committed murder box.
Right, exactly. And again, you're not supposed to, as a public charity, this is not like the Goodman Foundation, which would be Ortel Foundation, which would be a private foundation. This is an entity, the Clinton Foundation, that stands in the shoes of government, so therefore cannot, in theory, engage in any illegal activities. So concealing the fact that your main fundraiser, a politically active firm that principally raises money for liberal and progressive candidates and causes, was disciplined for going into multiple states, likely including raising money for the Clinton Foundation, and they haven't disclosed any of this properly in any state ever. Okay?
That's how they like to do it.
I know, that's how they roll. So, that's their fundraising firm. But if you go back in the next one, they've also tried to hide the fact that they themselves, this one here, were disciplined in Mississippi 3 times. And there's a guy, a great guy, I went down to DC and met him, Mark Greenblatt. This is an extensive story that came out right before the election. The Clinton charity fails to disclose fines and legal settlements. And it goes on and on and on, chapter and verse. People need to read this. You, Mr. Wemple, I don't disclose any facts. Rebut this. Ask the Clinton Foundation about this. This is not simple traffic tickets. You're not allowed to do this. Hire a crooked fundraising firm, fail to register in a state like Mississippi, and fail to disclose you've been disciplined in Mississippi and every other state, fail to disclose your solicitation arrangements in every other state. You're not allowed to do that. And there are other instances I believe we're going to hear about tomorrow from the whistleblowers where they've had multiple additional failures in multiple states. So before you get into their problems internationally where they lied chapter and verse about what they could do around the world. So we go back to the slide. For those who don't remember this, here's the IRS treatise. You get a huge kick out of this, that people had to write something in 1985, why a charity cannot engage in acts that are illegal or contrary to public policy. And this is bedrock, unchallenged law. You can't do it. You can't set up a charity to break the law. That's not we're the Bonnie and Clyde charity. We're going to raise money for the Clinton family by breaking the law. That's how we roll. That's not supposed to be allowed.
They love it.
Right? See, this violation of constitutionally valid laws is inconsistent with exemption under IRC 501c3. Okay? So you shouldn't have to write this, but they did. And if anybody wants to debate, and maybe Bill Clinton wants to debate whether you can have a charity devoted to breaking the law because the man wrote the law and everybody knows the man's crooked and we're all going to die anyway, so why does it matter? I mean, you can't do what the Clintons did. So just on this, you'd start in 1999, you'd say, look, before we get to the rest of the 20-year period where you broke the law and escalated the fraud, I mean, here's something you filed in 2000 while Bill was still president. It's totally fraudulent.
Well, we followed more laws than we broke.
You're scarily good at this. So, construction fraud. Let's talk about that for a second. So, the simplest way, and it's one of the old, I bet you the pyramids, when the pyramids were built and the Sphinx was built, they probably, did construction fraud back. They went to the pharaoh and said, he doesn't need the money. We'll say that the pyramids cost whatever the
20% more for the mud.
Exactly right. Yeah. Who knows how much mud we put in these pyramids? You know. And then they went down. They probably went to the North Pole where it's cool for the summer. You know, to build.
Wasn't there some scandal about somebody importing mud from Korea and they
all
didn't
kinds of
actually get the mud from there?
Of course. Or what about? I think was it Nestle or somebody that was selling? He said they were selling you spring water and it's toilet bowl water or whatever it was. I mean, but construction, with the essence of construction, right? Unless you have somebody physically on the site 24/7, enough people to monitor every worker, you are not going to know exactly what went into the project. There's no way to know. Particularly a big building, you know they may show you the walls open and say, see, we put in this very expensive pipe and look at that and look at that. Then you leave, they take the pipe out, they put cheap pipe in the wall, they cover up the wall. How are you going to know? Right. You're going to break open the building when it's finished and say, figure that out? Or they say, you know what, we used 2,500 yards of concrete. How do you know if they really use 2,500 yards of concrete? I mean, you're going to measure, you stand there and say that. How do you know what's in the concrete? That has the right proportions of whatever you're supposed to have?
John Glasgow could be in the concrete.
Yeah, not to mention others. So construction fraud is really too common. And, you know, if you hit this first link here, here's a story in the news just today or yesterday or whatever. People were involved in I think the Bloomberg headquarters construction fraud scheme where the cost the company tens of millions. So basically the way it works is you get a crooked vendor to submit an invoice that says, you know, I'm giving you this invoice for $2 million for, you name it, whatever it should be. Mm-hmm. And you got an insider in the construction company who verifies the invoice, says, yes, this is something you should pay the client. It goes to the client, you got a crook in the client who's very happy to, you know, to steal money, and it's a conspiracy. It's not going to be one or two people. They're going to be somebody, a crooked vendor, crooked contractor, a crooked lender typically, a crooked person inside the vendor or whatever, and they get together, and what they do is they get authorized payments more than actually are needed for the building, and they steal the difference. It's that simple. So you say the Clinton Foundation complex cost $165 million, it really costs $100 million, you steal $65 million. It's that simple. And it's not like, you know, let's think about the kind of people who might not be able to figure that out. I mean,
James Comey.
Well, James Comey could never figure it out, or you know,
Rod Rosenstein.
Hillary Clinton couldn't figure it out. You know, Mueller may not be able to figure it out. But one person who certainly can figure out whether you're being ripped off on a construction project is the Trump Organization, because when you're a developer, you know, you make your money bringing the building in on budget, under budget, on time, etc. And you watch every trick in the book because they've all been tried on you. Right. And you're the one whose name is on the building. So when the tenant, you know, finds out when they're remodeling the house, they break into the wall and they discover it's not the fancy pipe, it's cheap pipe, you're going to have heard, they will know all this stuff. And somebody like a Donald J. Trump and his team, maybe he's not the
Even
man.
Ivanka Trump, you've seen her walking around with the hard hat telling people what to do.
You know, I have a healthy respect for family businesses. My father was involved in a family business, actually, of his grandfather and great-grandfather. I wish they hadn't sold it. But people who grow up in a family business, a multi-generational family business that's done a lot of work in development, they will instantly get that it should not have cost $165 million to build this supposed complex. And if it did, the last thing you would want to do is use accounting principles on a construction project that don't track the costs.
And that aren't approved.
So we put this here. This is directly from the missing financial statements, and we've done multiple shows in the past. People are interested. I can direct you, FBI, if you're interested. I can show you where you find this stuff. But it says here, the statements are not intended to present financial position or changes in net assets in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles. So note to dopey Andrew Kessel, okay, who allowed these statements to go in. People will say, well, you know, you can't prove that I intentionally did anything, and intent is key to proving fraud and corporate frauds. So I've got it out. I didn't intentionally, you know, as Barack Obama said about Hillary, she didn't intentionally mishandle classified information, so she can't be proven guilty. Here is a flat statement from the accountants saying that, in essence, the trustees directed them to use accounting principles that are not intended to comply with the law. So here is a knowing, intentional violation of the law during the entire period when the main thing was constructed. They said, you know what, rather than track and make sure there would be no fraud, we're going to use accounting principles that are not allowed in the United States of America. And here in New York, this is a reference to what New York State says, because New York State people, you could say they're difficult, Cuomo's difficult, people are difficult in New York, but New York has had too many charity frauds because the taxes are very high all in, so it's a good place to donate money because you get a lot of money back in theory, depending on your income. The New York laws, this law was passed, I think in '93, I may have that wrong, but it says here, it defines the annual financial report shall be accompanied by an annual financial statement which includes an independent certified public accountant's audit report. They're not saying they're not a piece of garbage but put out by BKD, that is not even remotely anything resembling a legally compliant report. It says no, it has to be for truly independent, certified, which BKD was not in 2002 in Little Rock, though they issued a fake audit in 2002 under the name BKD LLP, containing an opinion that the financial statements are presented fairly. It doesn't say in some respects, in all material respects. And then it doesn't say any old way the Clintons decide to do it. It says, and in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles, including compliance, not with some, but with all pronouncements of the Financial Accounting Standards Board and the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants that establish accounting principles relevant to not-for-profit organizations. So that's belt and suspenders. You gotta put, financial statements in that are generally accepted. This says, accordingly, the statements are not intended to present financial position or changes in net assets in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles. And here you have James Comey, maybe Rod Rosenstein, definitely Robert Mueller, for 4 frickin' years. They're watching this thing. There's 4 frickin' years worth of audits here, all of which say, we put this in and we don't intend to comply. We're the Clintons. We do not intend to comply with the law. And Mueller says, no reasonable prosecutor will go after this.
No, Comey said that.
I'm just saying, back in 2005, maybe Mueller said, no reasonable, and so people watch this, they see the Clintons get away with it. The Clintons can then tweak the authorities and say, you let us get away with this. Why are you coming after us now? You said it was okay. This fraud must be fully exposed, and the people who have obstructed the inquiry into this fraud need to be exposed, and they need to be punished. And for the benefit of future generations in this country, we need to lay a clear marker down, as the whistleblowers will do tomorrow, saying, here's what we found. We're just private citizens with limited resources. This is what we found. You've got a 35,000 person organization in the FBI, which, when they want to go against a Manafort, or they want to go, send 2 agents on short notice up to see me, they can do that. Why didn't they send a bunch of agents into Andrew Kessel, and say, give us your goddamn correspondence file with BKD, and give us every single email back and forth related to donations solicited for the Clinton Foundation from inception to 2018.
That's Andrew Kessel, right?
I think so.
Well,
it's a
now
picture
the
of him.
FBI knows what he looks like, so they could,
Oh, that's right.
go knock on his door and
Right.
be like, "Hey,
I
let's
think,
have some coffee at McDonald's."
it's been reported that in January of 2017 the FBI did that. So let's.
Who wasn't he the one who said, "I know where the bodies are buried"?
He is.
Yeah, he might be buried alongside them.
I actually think he's safe now.
Why?
Because of being targeted. It's just he's
Targeted by who?
and being outed. But I know where the bodies are buried. His name's out there, and I think he's.
I don't know. They might still.
I hope they're out of that business. So if we go to page 7, okay. Now, people talk about that 18 U.S.C. 1001 or whatever it was, 1001. This is an interesting. I love the caption of this. 18 U.S.C. 1341 is frauds and swindles.
Yeah.
Okay. And here's the actual text with a link to it. I don't know, actually, yeah. Whoever having devised or intending to devise any, not some, any scheme or artifice to defraud, or for obtaining money or property by means of false or fraudulent pretenses, representations, or promises, okay? You're fined under this title or in prison not more than 20 years or both for bank fraud, which is, I believe, what they committed. If it affects a financial institution, you're fined not more than $1 million, not more than 30 years, or both. Okay? So if we go back into the slide here, In 2003, there are multiple examples of, concerning 2003, there's a fake audit, and there are actually 2 990s submitted for 2003, and as you'll learn tomorrow, many state forms filed concerning 2003, none of which says that they borrowed $28 million in 2003. But in 2006, when they needed to cover up a portion of this fraud, they claimed that they had borrowed $28 million in 2003 to hide, because they jacked up the asset side of the balance sheet by 40-odd million. They needed to jack up the liability side, so they invented a fake bank loan and a fake set of accrued liabilities. And it magically balanced, and we've taken you through that in the past. So the biggest issue with this loan is when I go through the math, and I haven't finished it yet, but I've done enough basic work on it to say the Clinton Foundation did not need to raise $28 million to finish its building project, its real costs. So this money was raised under false pretenses from the borrower, Bank of America being the big piece, $26 million and change, and another from Metropolitan Bank, a local bank. They didn't need that money because they had already raised enough money to pay the real costs, but they submitted a false application. They caused the Bank of America to lend money. I don't know if it's across state lines or not. That needs to be investigated in depth. Why did they raise that money? What did they tell the National Archives about this loan? How could they have made a donation of property by license when the property was encumbered by a loan, it had been secured illegally? A lot of questions here, and a lot of answers need to be given. And many pieces of information show that these loans were not obtained in 2003. So there are massive sets of problems here. People say, well, it's so far ago, the statute of limitations has run. No, statute of limitations has not run. They never filed a tax return in 1997, which means their tax returns, I would argue, are open until 1997. And beyond that, they amended returns for 10, 11, 12, and filed a return for 10, 11, 12, and 13, and filed a return for 14 on November 16th, 2015, which starts all of that work on December 31st, 2009. The starting place for December 31st, 2009 is false and materially misleading because of these and other reasons back into history. So I would argue there is no statute of limitations bar to prosecuting the filing of false and materially misleading amended tax returns starting on November 16th, 2015, and every year thereafter, including the most recent ones filed, which are crazy in terms of Cohn-Resnick having failed to do 2 years worth of information for 17 and 16 on a comparable basis, and year-end 17 and year-end 16 on a comparable basis, which you have to do, and they didn't do. So that's another category. If we go into the next page, we have this issue of India Inc. People talk about Russia, 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 China, China, China. The real thing that I would like to point out is, here's Hillary and Uma dancing away at some wedding in India. Prior to Bill Clinton's presidency, United States policy was pro-Pakistan and neutral to India, maybe negative. Bill changed that. And as a result, there's a lot of residual affection towards Bill Clinton in India. And we have done a lot of work, people around me and I have done a lot of work looking into Bill's various deals in India. He struck up an arrangement with a guy called Vinod Gupta, who is the CEO of Info Group USA, who was bounced out of his company in the SEC settlement. This is an excerpt, and there's a link to the settlement. Please don't hit the link. It says that he had one contract from May 1st, 2002 to April 30th, 2005, where he got $2.1 million in other compensation. This is Bill Clinton. And then in September 2005, October 1, 2005 through September 30, he got another $1.2 million in other compensation. And articles suggest that Hillary and Chelsea got expenses reimbursed for lavish travel around the world by Info Group USA. None of these payments show up in explicitly mentioned in any Clinton Foundation filings where you're supposed to disclose related party relationships. A related party would be where a significant donor confers a personal benefit on a Bill Clinton and his family. That needs to be disclosed. That could potentially be criminal allurement. We've talked about that before. The great Alana Goodman, who's a wonderful journalist and a nice person, she wrote this story in November of 2015, and it's really astounding if you look at it, if you can bring it up, please.
It was resisting being clicked.
It's anti-clickbait. That's odd. I guess you have to scroll down maybe or something. Yeah, string of felons. Yeah.
Yes.
I think we keep going down the page.
Well, there's our friend Rajat Gupta.
Yeah. So this is the same day they refiled their tax returns. Numerous former board members. It goes on and on and on. This is about the time I came up with Ortel's first and only law, where you just take any person connected with the Clinton Foundation. As an example, pick this guy here into Google, Victor Menezes, and hit fraud in Google. Just put Victor Menezes and fraud and see what comes up. Ortel's first law at work.
Ex-Citigroup executive settles SEC civil charges.
Right, and so, generally speaking, with charitable work, what you would like to try to do is make sure that people on your board are not involved in settling insider trading charges for $2.2 million.
Because that generally means he did it.
Yeah, ill-gotten gains and $783,778 in penalties. I mean, the number of people who are affiliated with the Clintons, one way or the other, compensating the Clintons, donating to the Clintons, who have had to contest with and pay fraud, some of whom are in prison, is astounding to me. And the larger story, if you go into the slide, the larger story, if you go back to, say, 92, January 20th, 93, when Bill showed up, India was an economic joke. It was a basket case. It was a failed socialist state, and it was as a result of Bill Clinton's policies. The United States encouraged corporations to, like GE and others, with Rajat Gupta, one of the guys affiliated with the Clintons, who hired dopey Chelsea Clinton at McKinsey. Under Bill Clinton's presidency, the United States and many multinational companies ill-advisedly housed their valuable information and back offices in India. That project to allow outsourcing in India, to allow lower paid but smart people in India to do the work of Americans, cost tens of millions of jobs, hundreds of billions of dollars, placed our secrets at risk, and allowed unscrupulous people in India and elsewhere, potentially, the ability to steal intellectual property and create companies competing against our own companies. Meanwhile, Bill Clinton's pound of flesh was to get $3.3 million out of here, not disclose the $3.3 million in the Clinton Foundation falls, or the significance of any of these connections. This is just one example. You could go on and on and on, going through every single potential relationship with an Indian party, not just to pick on India, but this is one example where the Clintons were very involved. And Marsha Blackburn's staff, we've shown you this before, in September, if we hit this, has done an exhaustive report on the supposed India success story, and this is really worth reading. How come nobody in Congress, the FBI, has done anything about this? This thing came out in September of 2016. Marsha Blackburn started studying this in April of 2015. And then this is heavily footnoted and sourced, chock-a-block with details. I was allowed to have some role trying to help the person who wrote this, but they wrote it themselves. Did a fantastic. You see, this is unlike Clinton's, where the Clintons tell the Washington Post, Charles Ortel has made allegations for years that are demonstrably false. Like, what are they? Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
It sounds good.
Demonstrably false.
Demonstrably is impressive.
That's an impressive word. Yeah, coming from a former president and a foundation, this Ortel guy, he's obviously wrong. So, but
you should have just told him, I don't know anything about that.
So the whole India slice needs to be investigated very, very carefully by objective FBI agents, of which there are some. I mean, this is really serious stuff that Ranbaxy may have supplied 90%, or other generic, and Ranbaxy may have supplied 90% of all the HIV/AIDS medicines that went through the Clinton Foundation, non-existent legal entity, to like 40 countries around the world approximately, with donated money, and no former government's interested to know, their connection to this potential fraud that may have actually killed people. And I'm the nut for trying to, stand up for people of color, frankly, in Africa and in the subcontinent who were administered these drugs. Maybe they shouldn't have had them in the first place. they go around saying they're fighting AIDS. They're not fighting AIDS. Very few people know how to fight AIDS. They're trying to arrest the transition of HIV into AIDS, but they certainly have had nothing to do with curing AIDS. Nobody's done that yet.
I saw a pretty interesting video talking about, problems that Africa has, and I think you've discussed this as well. Water and electricity are way bigger problems than AIDS in any country in Africa, and also just in terms of building an infrastructure so that the future of Africa can be sound. Electricity and water are the two biggest problems. So fighting AIDS there is not necessarily even useful.
Right, and I, as a student, long ago spent time across Africa, and Africa parts of Africa are stunningly beautiful, but when you speak to Africans now, because of the wireless revolution and internet and stuff, I've got one ally in Norway who's looking at this hard, does business in Africa, and he tells me, Africans, they're not interested in handouts. They say, Mark Zuckerberg built his Facebook from a dorm room at Harvard, basically, maybe. But a lot of companies come out of garages around the world now. If you come up with a good idea in Africa, you could maybe take it global. They're interested in competing and trying to bring whatever may be great out of Africa, exporting it around the world. And this idea that that Africa is the white man's burden, and we ought to have all these social justice virtue signalers wearing their stupid hats and scruffy beards, go down to Africa, insist on living in fancy air-conditioned houses and lecture everybody, you shouldn't eat bacon and whatever. That's not what is required in Africa.
You're probably not eating too much bacon.
I'm just making that up, but I'm trying to get a rise out of you, which I succeeded in doing. But that's not what they want. There's a great book. I'll say it again. It's called "No Such Thing as a Free Gift" by Lindsay McCoey, and she's an English academic, and she focuses on the Gates Foundation and the damage that the Gates Foundation has done. Going into countries like Ghana and elsewhere and overpaying their staff and not really checking the unintended consequences of the various activities that they do.
Right.
And the simple truth is it's not easy to give away large amounts of money. When you try to do it, I'm aware of somebody who tried to do it in a place that's war-torn. Victims, not all victims deserve to be helped. They're bad victims. And you've got to be very careful before you get involved in that. People will lie about what really happened to them. People will actually be mentally ill, and maybe you don't help them by giving them just a gift and telling them to deal with it themselves. You have to give them treatment. Right. And you're right about Africa in particular, and Dr. Paul Farmer and his buddy Jim Kim should know better. They're smart PhDs, double PhDs from Harvard and MDs or whatever. They should know that the infrastructure in Africa is just so different than it is in the United States. There are not road systems and electric links out into the bush. The population is not concentrated in cities yet in many countries the way it is in the United States and Europe.
That was one of the focuses of this thing, was that it also, people are talking about plans to put green energy in Africa and stuff like that, and they were talking about how, they do a study of where to get the most wind or solar or whatever, and then what you would need to get that to the place where there's actually people who need it. It's
ridiculous.
An easy problem to solve. And it was also talking about how some of these green initiatives are actually way more wasteful than making more efficient versions of stuff we already have.
Well, and when I did a lot of work tried to raise a fund to invest in forestry around the world in 1998 through 2000, came very close but didn't ultimately succeed. What you learn when you actually study the facts is that one of the biggest contributors to climate destruction is the use of wood.
To burn instead of coal.
No, the use of wood to cook food.
Oh.
In across Africa. And I won't repeat the accent, but we were working on a potential project in, I think, Ethiopia. And this Finnish guy said, look, Charles, I was trying to say, why Ethiopia? It's big population, trees. Why can't we do something there? It's got a good growing climate, certain place. We can do it we get land for free. We'll fix it up. We'll make it work. And he just looked at me in a heavy Finnish accent. He said, I won't do the accent. He said, Charles, there isn't a fence high enough in Ethiopia to keep a starving Ethiopian away from a tree that might be used to cook his meal. Huh. It just isn't. And that's when you're out there and you don't have electricity and you've got starving kids and they need to have You need to boil the water because it's rancid, you know, and so you're boiling the water, you're cooking for you're gonna, any tree that's there, that you're gonna take it. And just when you spread that across, you know, tens, hundreds of millions of people around the world, you know, the damage is monumental. On top of that, an even bigger one is the natural disasters, the wildfires in California, volcanoes, earthquakes, stuff like that, release tremendous amounts. And so when you're slipping around the edges with solar, I mean, maybe you could cover the Sahara Desert with solar panels, maybe that would help, I don't know. But it's a question of numbers, things that, you know, these social justice warriors don't like to investigate. They love to, as I say, they're virtue signalers, most of them.
They would just say, oh, this is green, it's solar energy.
Green,
so
it's
it
obviously
must be
better.
good.
I mean, I'm a greenist. Why
But
don't you say it's yellow?
Right, if it was making electricity out somewhere where it can't get to whoever it needs to get to, then it's not doing anything.
I mean, I'm all for trying to use energy resources efficiently. I'm all for trying to have the cleanest possible air and water. Of course you want that. But equally, you don't want to come up with some scheme led by, you know, Alexandria or
Carbon credits.
Cortez, you know, whatever, doesn't understand the first fucking thing about an economy. To just say, yeah, it's green, we'll do it, it's green.
I saw the other day she decided she's Jewish. She was speaking at a synagogue.
Why not? I mean, she's probably a member of the same chair, Lenny however you pronounce that, Lenny Lenape or whatever tribe that.
I don't know.
So if we go to the next page, we have two more and then we're done. Or I guess, yeah, this is an interesting one. So there's been a lot of chatter about Peter Schweitzer's book, Uranium One, and the allegation that $145 million went from Justra's Canadian charities into the Clinton Foundation in the period 2005 through 2009.
Right.
So this is a project I'd like to enlist the crowd in. We know, because the Clinton Foundation has filed their paperwork in their Schedule B, which is a list of their large donations. We know the amounts. We don't know the identities, but we know the amounts claimed by the Clinton Foundation in 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. There are 40 different specific claims, other than the big ones I'll take you through in a second. And the challenge for the crowd is to figure out, by looking through the logical donors, they include the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, the Gates Foundation, the large donors in the list of contributors that the Clinton Foundation puts out. They give you the people who've given 25 or more, and 10 to 25, and 5 to 10. We start with that, and we try to identify, has anybody claimed these amounts in 2005 on their form? So in the Gates Foundation, we've already done this. And what you see is that there are massive inconsistencies here. This is an estimate in 2005 that this first amount of $46.2 million is all the less than 2% donations, in theory, that went to the Bush-Clinton-Katrina Fund, and in general to the Clinton Foundation.
I believe less than 2%.
So
individual donations less than 2% of the total.
Right. So you only have to disclose to the IRS. The IRS has had since 2006, in the case of the 2005 filing. The IRS knows the specific identity claimed by the Clinton Foundation of every single one of these donors. Okay? They don't need to do what we're going to do.
Right.
They could just look in their file and say, well, the Clinton Foundation said that Gates gave him, let's say that, $3,999,960. Then you go to the Gates Foundation PF, which is their private foundation form, and you look, they have to disclose their grants. And they don't add up, they don't reconcile, I'll just tell you that. The Children's Investment Fund doesn't reconcile, Gates doesn't reconcile, governments don't reconcile. And the IRS is sitting there, well, I don't care, I'm Lois Lerner. The Lois Lerner's in charge of the tax-exempt department.
Something that we should add, Charles, that I'm not sure if we've ever said, is that any individual or business owner who's watching, who's ever been audited by the IRS or hassled by the IRS, should be pretty irate that none of this stuff has set off any alarm bells.
So if you take the total they declare, you subtract the less than 2%, you subtract the amounts that I believe are for Unitaid, and you subtract the one amount for Justra, that I think is that 31.3 million in 6. Curiously, Justra in interviews claims he gave that money in 5, but it only shows up in 6. Okay? The residual is accounted for here, and the way these rules work, you have to, each individual person must aggregate. So if Jason Goodman, if you gave 16 different donations during the year that aggregated 4273305, you would aggregate them and you would put your name down and you'd say, you know, the total I gave during the year was this. Well, there's no combination of math, right? If you, I'll just tell you right now, if 145 million was routed to the Clinton Foundation between 2005 and 2009 out of Canada, and we know 31.3 came from Juicer in 2006, there's no combination of math that would account for the difference, 145 million less 31,324.03. Oh, because you take one of these would have to be, one of these amounts, just take the highest one, 10 million, okay, would have to be, let's say, from a Juicer charity. And take another 10 million, that's 20 million. Take another 10.6, that's 30.6 million. Then take 11, now you're at 42.1, and now 15.9, you know, you're at roughly $60 million, but you have to account for $112 million, right? So where did this Juicer money actually go? I suspect what happened is it went into the Hillary Clinton presidential campaign, senatorial reelection campaign, personal enrichment, who knows? Now, the reason I bring this up is that supposedly we have the William Campbell whistleblower who cares about this period 5 through 9, and we have the Kane whistleblower who cares about this period 5 through 9. And we have, you know, in theory, we have these two curious FBI agents who were able to come up here. Now, they're not on the Clinton Foundation team. Maybe it's the Little Rock people. All you have to do, guys, is you just go to dopey Andrew Kessel, who says, I don't understand consolidation. You say, Andrew, I want to see the specific identities that you claimed here, right, of all of these gifts from 2005, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And then you need to go to each of the donors and you say, the Clinton Foundation said that they got 4.273,305, but on your PF form you say you gave them 6. Why didn't you care about the difference? I mean, why didn't you, you were happy to give them 6 and say they only got 4.3 and stole the difference? You know, did you do anything about this? And you know, when FBI agents show up at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the Gates Foundation, you send 16, 17 FBI agents into there on a Monday morning at 10 o'clock, you know, that's going to get some attention. And you know, Bill Gates has a lot to lose, in particular because he and his wife and Warren Buffett control the Gates Foundation, and they each have monumental net worth at risk outside the foundation. So all it takes is to get, you know, spot the inconsistencies, pick on somebody like a Gates, or maybe it's Fred Eichner in Chicago or whatever, and ask, you know, how much you really gave, when did you really give it, where's the check receipt, you know, and then ask, how come you kept on giving to this fraud? They were defrauding you right and left. What's the answer? Why don't you care about this? And you say, listen, the stakes for you, Fred and Bill and Robert Wood Johnson, is you don't answer these questions properly, we're going to shut your charity down, and we're going to send you a gigantic bill, tax bill, you know, because you weren't a charity. You were just paying protection money to the Clinton family in the hope that Hillary Clinton would become president, and, you know, for a modest pittance of 150 million out of Gates, that protects Microsoft. That protects you from tax prosecution. That protects this and that. So this has to be studied in great depth. And this is a project, I told you, Children's Investment Fund Foundation, Government of Norway, Government of Australia. There is a clue in the Clinton Foundation contributor list. You can do this work, send me emails, and we're going to keep track of this. We're going to figure out how much of this can be accounted for. Meanwhile, the FBI needs to do its damn job here. This is not complex. This is not rocket science. This is basic arithmetic. It should have been done a long time ago, and we need to understand why the IRS didn't get its ass in gear and do this. In the William J. Clinton Foundation, dump 1, 2, and 3, at the end of, I think, dump either 1 or 2, there is mention that a grand jury was seated in New Orleans on the Clinton Foundation in, I think, 2008 or 9. So what was that all about?
What happened?
And I told the FBI agents when I said, listen, you guys, I'm going to guess, and you don't have to acknowledge that it's the case, that you have I confirmed that the FBI vault is run by the FBI. And they said, and I said,
oh,
well,
yeah, they said,
yeah,
of course
absolutely.
it is.
And I said, it's all right, guys. I mean, can't you go in the FBI to a vault file and look at the stuff that's redacted? You know, don't you have the ability? No, I could see what they knew that they had. They just didn't really want to talk about it, so they just deflected it. But somebody, if you're listening to the FBI, the question is not, can you do this? The question is, why wasn't this done a long time ago? And who made a decision? Somebody had to make a decision at the FBI. Maybe it was Bob Mueller, maybe it was a deputy, to say, you know what, we're not going to go there. We're not going there. We're not going to do our job. So who was that person? Is that person still working for the FBI? Because they shouldn't be.
Someone in the comments, Cheryl, is saying the IRS drove her crazy for $1,000 and they do nothing about the Clintons. I mean, that's the exact type of indignation people should be feeling. Like, we're subjected to rules and laws, but then someone who finds a way to not be rises to the power of presidency and protects themselves and their friends and those that would allow them to do this corruption. I mean, this is why I'm always talking about the people who are spreading false information about you and spreading false information about me and going around intimidating the people that come forward as witnesses, whether it's to crowdsource the truth or to the Department of Justice. This type of witness intimidation, this type of whistleblower intimidation. I mean, frankly, you and I are essentially blowing a whistle. We're alerting the public to these frauds, and people who come with false allegations are either completely ignorant of the facts, deliberately lying to everyone, or malicious people for some other reason. So it's really just frustrating the way these stupid smears go on.
Exactly. So, and another thing to point out here is I put here that the 2006 paperwork was, some of it filed in 7 and some of it as late as 2008. So, one needs to really, this is a simple task, find the identities, let's figure out the identities of the 40 supposed donors and do the amounts. We know that Unitate, for example, the 3 amounts shown here that aggregate in the 200 million range are wrong, because the French government did an audit and they claim in that period 7, 8, 9 that approximately 297 million went from Unitate to the Clinton Foundation. So we know these numbers are wrong. The biggest numbers are wrong. Okay, we know the Gates numbers are wrong. We know the Children's Investment Fund numbers are wrong. Those are the big donors. And typically when you read the accounting literature, I'll distill it down, what they say is, standard parlance is, if you have a business, and you've got, like, you don't try to do it this way, but if you've got, 3 customers account for 80% of your sales,
right,
you kind of like to keep track on how much money they gave. You don't want to say, thank you so much for your $16 million donation when it was actually $116 million. They tend to get cheesed off at you.
right.
And so similarly, not to be able to keep track of your largest donors, not to have an organization that's filed anywhere,
Crazy.
You're not an organization. So if we go to the final slide. It's interesting, I forgot to edit the top of this, but the Clinton Foundation trustees do face massive legal jeopardy. And this is an excerpt from a great book. If we hit this book link here, this is a book about what? It's a book about a legal guide for Arkansas nonprofit and volunteer organizations. So would we say this possibly is an on-point legal guide for the Clinton Foundation, which is an Arkansas supposed nonprofit? I think so. I think we can safely say.
Market.
I think we can say that this is, safely something that applies to the Clinton Foundation. We go back into the slide.
Oh, I thought it would have been. I expected another resident of Arkansas to be the author of that book.
So, we have this question: are the foundation trustees guilty of negligence or gross negligence? Neither is good.
Pick you.
Negligence is the failure to do something that a reasonably careful person would do. An individual or organization that fails to use ordinary care, like, do I have any audits? I might want to have some audits, which they never had. And in doing so harms the person or property of another, may be liable for negligence, okay? There's no question in my mind that this is negligence, minimum negligence. But gross negligence is the failure to use even slight care, carelessness or recklessness to a degree that shows utter indifference to the consequences that may result. That's when, for example, on November 2nd, 2013, while you've stolen a bunch of property, all of the official records of your Secretary of State tenure, you got them up in Chappaqua and Secret Service and down in Washington, D.C., and who knows what else. That's when you said, you know what? This public charity, we don't like people poking around in it, and we're having a hard time getting outside directors, so we're just going to put the family in charge. We're going to amend the bylaws. We're not going to tell anybody. And we're just going to say that, the only people who can control this thing are Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea for their lives, and that they control the operations of the foundation outside the normal course of business. So outside of board meetings, whatever, and any decisions made by this executive committee consisting only of the Clinton family is not subject to review by any other trustee. This is absolutely, it's preposterous
Yeah.
that anybody would advise them to do that. I mean, the lawyer, if they were advised by a lawyer for doing that, that lawyer needs to be disbarred and put out of the practice and shamed. You know, it's ridiculous.
Tarred and feathered.
Tarred and
perhaps?
feathered if that were legal. But so, in my mind, and I'm not a lawyer, there's no question we're talking here about utter recklessness, utter disregard. This case cannot stand untested. Now let's go look at the California portal and see if the California authorities are doing anything about this. This is, for those of you, California laws are stricter. If we punch into FEIN 311580204,
058.
158, what did I say, 32?
Sorry, start again.
311580204, I think, from memory. We have it in a previous, if we hit search at the bottom. Yeah, then if we, this says they're current, okay? Now let's check, let's go back in the other one. 271414646. 646. Delinquent. This is Chai, still delinquent. And you know, basically this is an exercise. You can't say, as somebody who's raised $2.8 billion from 2004 to 2017, that you don't have the funds to make sure that you're in one of the most important fundraising areas that in California. It's the largest electoral college state, a lot of fancy people, a lot of money, live and give money to charities. You can't say that you don't have the staff to get this done. And it is not a traffic ticket. I called New York State and I spoke to several times to the legal department, and I said, listen, I'm not a lawyer and I just want to understand the rules. You know, and I got somebody like, you know, the Odd Couple, Jack, is it?
Felix Unger.
No, the other one, Jack Klugman, or what was his name?
Oh, yeah.
The other one.
Oscar.
Oscar, the rough, grouchy one.
Yeah.
A guy like that. There was Oscar the Grouch answered the phone, and I start going, and I said, you know,
Madison, Oscar Madison.
Oscar Madison. I say to this guy, I say, listen, you know, I'm aware of a charity, and you know, there are these rules, like, you know, you're supposed to. Do you really have to give? You know, let's say I have money from foreign governments. Do I really have to disclose the identities of the foreign governments that are giving my charity? And the guy goes, what do you want to go to? How long do you want to go to jail for, Sonny? How long do you want to go to jail?
Who was that?
Some guy, Oscar. I don't know the guy's name, in the New York Attorney General's office. Then, if we hit this is the New York State portal, and we go through the same exercise. 3-1. There's a further. Oh, let's see.
What is
this
that?
is the wrong page. I think I gave you the wrong page. Hit search the registry here. Right here. And EIN 311580204. Let's see if they filed their 2017 return in New York yet. Ba-da-da-da.
Is it searching?
Yeah, it is. It's down in the lower left. A little tension here.
Huh. It's pretty slow.
It is. It'll
It's
eventually.
got to go to Chappaqua and back
to
before
Washington,
it-
D.C. And here we go.
There we
Bill
go.
Hillary Chelsea Clinton Foundation. So we hit that thing here.
It's a real slow website.
Yeah. All right. Then go down this page a little bit. Let's see. Have they filed their 2017 return in New York? No, they haven't. Okay. Now, if we hit, so they're delinquent. Maybe it's in the system and it hasn't been picked up. The first link up there is the amended, second time they amended their bylaws to take Hillary's name off as one of the Class A directors. June 27, 2017, 7 months after she lost, they admit in New York for the first time that the Clinton family has controlled this foundation illegally. The certificate of incorporation, if we hit that, this is a version from July 9th, 2009. In the lower left corner, you have to hit that thing, yeah. And there's no certificate of incorporation. I mean, there's no, the articles of incorporation are not there. This is
But
just,
the devil went down to Georgia and Charlie Daniels
Right.
certified the
right. But there's
book.
no,
He signed it.
yeah, he did. Is there, what's in the next page?
Oops.
Oh yeah, this just shows that they amended it, the name of the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation, and they just amended the name. right?
Nice.
It doesn't say anything about so they didn't ever, according to New York, they, as far as New York understands, they have never amended Article 8, the one we talked about, where the people who control this are trustees, right? They've never done this properly in any state, as far as we know.
Trustees.
So that, Jason, we went over a little bit, but it takes more time to tell the truth than to tell a lie, I think, and.
There is no over, Charles. This is, you know, we've had over 900 viewers, and we've had over 1,000 viewers with us for most of the time. We've got 934 across the spectrum of platforms that are monitored on this multi-chat application. I want to thank everybody for staying with us and remind everyone that Crowdsource the Truth is viewer supported. So please become sponsors of the show. You can go to patreon.com/crowdsource the truth and become a sponsor there. You're going to get access to exclusive content that now can also be seen on the new Subscribestar channel. So people can also go to subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth and you can become sponsors over there. We will be adding more links, and of course most of the legacy stuff I'm going to have to work out how to get in there, but people can also sponsor the show by going to paypal.me/crowdsource the truth. Anybody who becomes a sponsor for $10 or higher, I will personally send you the Sunday with Charles screensaver, which has been met with so far universally positive reviews. So that's a good thing.
You might want to send it for free to the Clinton Foundation trustees.
Yeah, I might do that. We should make a Truman the Tiger screensaver pretty soon and send it over to, what's his name?
Eric Hansen, exactly.
All right, Charles. Well, thank you very much. We'll be really interested to see what happens tomorrow with the whistleblowers there at it's Congress, right? They're
right, in the subcommittee on oversight. Mark Meadows is chairing it, 2 p.m. tomorrow. I think it's in the Rayburn building, but all the particulars online, I believe. Just Google it.
Very good. And thanks everybody for watching. I'll see everyone tomorrow.